Planning Board. We will call our meeting of November 1st to order. Just by way of introductions, to my right, Paul Labby, Rick Bertram, Paul Dostu, who serves as co-chair of the committee, Ron Sassi, who's our secretary. We have town council Mr. Brackett here with us tonight, and our administrative assistant Wilma Davis at the far end of the table. There is a sign-up sheet here. If you haven't signed up, for those of you here in the audience, please do so, so that we have a record of everyone who's attended today's meeting. We have two public hearings on the agenda for tonight. The first one is for the Helena Chemical Company on Elm Street. And before we actually start that, I'm going to just read just the ground rules, if you will, for the public hearing process. So after I've opened the public hearing, we will read the meeting notice into the record, and then we'll ask for comments from any supporters of the project. And actually, first we'll ask the applicant or their representative to describe the project and any specific requests that they're making, any waiver grants of the board regarding the project. Once they're done with their presentation, we'll entertain any comments from supporters of the project. If there's questions of the applicant or their representative, those questions are to be made to the chair, and we'll engage the applicant as required. We will then ask for any opponents of the project to be recognized and make any comments on the project. And again, if there's questions on the project of the applicant or their representative, those will be made through the chair. The board will then ask any questions of the applicant or any of the supporters or opponents of the project as required or necessary, and then the public hearing will either be closed or, if necessary, continued to a subsequent date. The board will then deliberate on the project, during which time it may again ask questions of the applicant, supporters, or opponents, and then we will have our deliberations, at which time the chair will either seek to approve the project with or without conditions, reject the project, or ask for a motion to continue the hearing to a future date. So with that, we will start with the Helena Chemical Company. I'll quickly read the notice of the special permit. Planning Board will hold a public hearing on November 1st, 2017 at 6:30 in Hatfield Memorial Town Hall. The applicant, Helena Chemical Company, is seeking a special permit with site plan approval from the Planning Board pursuant to Section 5.4 of the Town of Hatfield zoning bylaw relative to the property located at 101 Elm Street. This is Assessor's Map 226, Lot 104. For the construction zone business for a 60-foot by 138 addition on the west side of the existing warehouse with steel construction to match the existing building in accordance with Section 3.0 use regulations, subsection 5.5, processing or warehousing of agricultural products. So with that, Tom, you're here. Okay, do you want to talk us through the project?
Sure, I'm glad to. I appreciate the opportunity. The plan, that works good. The plan hasn't changed from a year or 13 months ago when I was here and we discussed the zoning change that the town approved at annual town meeting. And of course I was in here about 60 days ago where we lined up this meeting for the special permit. So the addition is it's exactly the same construction, same plan as what we came up with a year ago. We haven't changed any of that. It's just a 60-foot addition to the west, and that's still going to leave us about 60 feet. I was meant to put a tape on it today, but it's about 60 feet is going to leave us from where the zoning has been changed out to that fence. It's 60 by 120 is actually the building, and then there's or 60 by 125, and then there's an 18-foot, 13-foot overhang out in the front just to keep the weather out of the big doors when we're moving product in and out. And maybe be able to park a truck under in the winter so there's not so much cleaning off to do. There's no additional loading docks, there's no additional pavement associated with it. It's to give us some extra space to work in. I think I mentioned to you a year ago that one of the big changes in our business is we do a lot more with seed now than we used to, and that comes in early. You know, it may come in before the first of the year on a typical year. We have to store that, and it's bulky. We do all kinds of seed, soybean, corn, golf course seed, you know, teas and greens and that sort of thing. So it takes up quite a lot of space. Additionally, what it does is it gives us additional space. Now, when we're putting loads together in the spring and we've got a lot of trucks going out, we stage loads. If the weather's good, we stage loads in the parking lot. So when the trucks come in at night, we can load them, which is great when the weather's good. But on the times when the weather's not so good, it really boxes us up for space when we're trying to do that inside. So quite a bit of this area is going to be used for staging loads, to be picking orders and getting them all staged. So that's all undercover and out of the parking lot, which will help traffic and access to the buildings. And move some of the products that we currently keep outside in the all-weather containers. We can move quite a great deal of those inside. So, yeah, it's not any different construction. I think it does a lot of good things for us. Workability, safety, worker safety, not having stuff so crowded. Access, if somebody needed to get in there in a hurry, that we'd be able to do that. And also, it's going to increase the square footage of the building that we're going to, at the same time we're doing this, we're going to update fire prevention and fire alarm systems so it addresses those concerns. We certainly want those addressed more than maybe they have been in the past, but the additional square footage incorporates that.
So, Tom, before we go any further, your special permit with site plan approval application indicates that you need to see section, and I will acknowledge that it actually it's incorrectly noted here. It's actually section 5.33 and 5.44 in the zoning bylaws for submittal requirements. And so there's a number of items under 5.33, which are the requirements for special permit application contents, that even with the additional material you provided us from the that you gave to the building inspector, we don't have. And these are all in here, and I would direct your attention to these because we're going to have these in order for us to be able to really review this project under our bylaws. For example, existing and proposed topography at a 2-foot contour interval and the location of wetland streams that may, or natural drainage swales that may be on the property, existing and proposed structures and their location. For alteration, I'm just reading through some of these proposed landscape features, including the location description of buffers and fencing and plantings. For alterations to any existing or new businesses, the maximum area of the building to be used for sales offices, maximum number of employees, parking spaces if required. And then under 5.44, which again this would fall under requirements, would be a detailed traffic impact statement in case where a proposed new building or project will contain more than 10,000 square feet. So that you may not, actually you probably are pretty close to that. And estimated daily and peak hour vehicle trips to be generated by the site and traffic flow patterns for vehicles and pedestrians. So we're going to need to get all of that material in order for us to be able to really adequately review the project under our bylaws.
I appreciate your call.
Yeah.
I wished it was a week earlier instead of 6 hours before the meeting that I got this. And I understand volunteer boards. I'm all about it. I live it myself. But
the issue is that this is what is in our application in terms of what's required,
right.
And then referencing our our bylaw, and so I guess the assumption is that when we came in, or when we had a chance to review material, or when we were coming in today, you would have this with us so that we could really, and when I looked at it, it was clear that we have a number of things that are missing.
Right. And I understand that. I scrambled to get together all those plans that we had. Like I said, it's not like I've been trying to avoid them, because I've been in every week talking to Wilma and so forth, trying to make sure that we had all the information and had assurances that we were. I guess I wasn't aware that you hadn't reviewed them ahead of time, but that's not here nor there.
Well, I guess,
but what I'm saying is the plan hasn't changed, and if we really need that additional information for an addition, I heard you say in the bylaws it talked about a new business.
well,
This
it's
is
for
just a-
alterations to any existing or new businesses,
Okay.
so this would be considered an alteration. So I think we are going to need to get the items, particularly since this is a special permit and a site plan review, that it's not, it's through another layer of review, if you will, which are laid out here under special permits 5.3 in our bylaws. So
Well, if we have to go for a continuance, and we
think-
can agree on a date that I can produce that, I would really appreciate it if it does need to be continued, if you decide that it needs to go that way, that if we could do it in less than a month, if we could get together. I know that's up to the whole board to discuss, but I can get the information generated. I have no doubt. If you pay enough, you normally can get enough information generated.
Well, I think rather than, because it's hard then even for people that may have come in to review the material, which is available as the hearing notice says, that, the application's available for inspection during regular business hours. So, even people that may have wanted to review this wouldn't have had much to look at. So why don't
The only thing I would add, suggest, is that maybe that application needs to be looked at, because Lydia and Wilma and so forth, we went through that made sure that everything that was directly on the application was here when the application was paid for.
Well, I think that paying for
and-
the application is one thing, but then so you're checking off special permit with site plan approval, but then then there's the reference in here that you need to see section 534, 544 for submittal requirements. So that's a subsequent submission, if you will, because I don't think we expect people to necessarily have all of that material available when they actually pull the application. So why don't we, I would actually move and suggest that we actually continue this hearing until we have all of the necessary information, because we really don't have enough here to work from.
No, I agree.
Can we move it to the 6th when we have our next meeting?
Well, I think what Tom is asking is if there's a chance we might be able to hold a meeting prior to the meeting on the 6th, which would be a whole month out.
And I realize Thanksgiving's in the middle of that, and that
I'm
kind
going
of,
to be out of town.
When do you,
I'll be back until the 1st of December.
okay.
So I don't know about the rest of
Yeah.
these guys, but also that would give anybody in the public that wants to see it.
Right, a chance to review it as well. I know this isn't what you want to hear, Tom, but I think we may need to wait until that next meeting, which then gives you time to pull everything together, and then there's time, if anybody wants to review it, to be able to do that. We don't need to go through the hearing requirements, because we're continuing the hearing to our next available meeting. And then that gives you a week or so to pull together these necessary items, to have them in the package, and then if there's anybody in the public who is interested in looking at that, they have, a week or so to take a look at it, as well as the rest of us before the hearing. Okay?
you're right, it's not what I want to hear, but I understand, I get it.
Yeah.
I mean, I certainly do.
Yeah.
What I would ask you to do is to reprint or put everything that Wilma has my email address, and email me so I have a comprehensive list when I hand it off. I can get all the information generated. and not miss anything, so we don't have to do this again.
Yeah, so this is in the bylaws, but we can, if you, Wilma, if you could just make a PDF of these representative pages, these, the pages in question, which is, again, 5.33 and 5.44, which provides the required contents of site plans for approval, and then the required special permit, requirements for a special permit application, okay? So can I get a motion to continue this hearing until our next meeting?
I move to
Paul.
continue this until
Yeah.
December 6th, right? December
Okay.
6th?
All right. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Okay. All right.
Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
Just correct.
Yeah, no, we're working on that today. Yeah. Yes. Okay, Tom?
Does anybody have any questions while they're here instead of coming back again, or anything I can answer for anybody?
Yeah, okay, before we close the hearing, is there anybody here who does have a question for Tom, particularly in light of some of the other additional materials that he's going to be pulling together for this? No? Okay. Are there, I'm just curious, of the people that are here, if you would just raise your hand if you're here specifically about this project versus one of the other ones? One? Only one other person? Okay, okay. All right. Okay. All right. Thank you. All right, Tom. Okay.
I'll be
All
looking
right.
for that email and
Yeah,
put it right on it.
we'll get it. Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is not until 7 o'clock. And so, knowing that it's probably good to pick up time, but that being said, there may be people who are coming at 7 for this, so we've got 10 minutes.
Talk about the minutes.
Yeah, so why don't we, we'll pick up the minutes while we've got some time. So in your package, Wilma, we have minutes from June 2nd and August 2nd, and then September 6th. So if you could quickly, if you haven't already read through those, if you would do that, we'll take each one up individually. Ron, can I take this? I seem to misplace mine. And Wilma, do we have Ashley coming in tonight? Ashley's here. Okay, there she is. Okay, great. All right. But you never heard back from Steve Cleveland? No. Okay. And Delbert Glover?
He's
Okay,
here.
all right, okay. All right, so why don't we take these up in the order in which we have them. We've got June 7th is our first set of minutes. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes as written?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Aye.
Paul Labby. Are there any comments, corrections, or anything that we need to consider here? Okay. So all in favor of accepting the minutes as written, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, hearing none, they pass unanimously. So our next set are the minutes of August 2nd. Okay, so do I have a motion to accept the meetings of August 2nd, 2017?
I make a motion to accept the meetings of,
Motion by Paul, is there a second? Second by Paul Labby. Any questions or discussions on this? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, those are adopted as submitted. The September 6th meeting minutes, 2017. Again, is there a motion to accept the minutes,
motion to accept the minutes of September 6th.
September 6th by Paul Labby, or Paul Dossel, is there a motion or a second? Yeah. Paul Labby. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Those are accepted as written unanimously. And now, finally, the meeting minutes of September 6th.
No, I think that date's wrong.
Is
That was
that's
it. That
wrong.
was it.
October 11th? Okay,
Wait a minute.
wait a second.
You weren't here, so.
I wasn't here, so this is,
This is gonna have to be.
This one, the last one with the, we talked to Mr. Modesto and Mr. Flynn and Ashley, who went over the housing.
Right,
That
so-
was September 11th.
September,
I mean,
October
October
11th.
11th.
Okay, so we'll need to change this
October 11th,
to October 11th, and I was not present, so not present. But Rick, Paul, and Ron were all
Right,
there?
right.
Okay.
So we had
Otherwise,
there's no changes.
no changes? Okay, so can I get a motion to accept the minutes with the changes that the date be reflect October 11th, and that the list of members present reflect the fact that I was not present at that meeting?
So moved.
So moved, is there a second?
I second it.
Okay, so all in favor with those changes noted?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so those minutes pass, and you got those changes, Wilma? Okay, great. All right. All right, we are a few minutes before 7, so I am going to, because we have some housekeeping to do prior to that, so I'll get started. So at the stroke of 7, I'll open the public hearing on our next item. And again, for those of you that just arrived, actually, everyone who's come in here in the last few minutes, there's a sign-up sheet. If everybody can make sure that, and you have signed in, if you know you haven't, please acknowledge so that we can get your signature. So here are the ground rules for the public hearing. After opening the public hearing, which I've just done, I'll read the meeting notice, and we'll provide time for the applicant or the representative to describe the project and any specific requests that they might have for waiver grants, whatever, for the board regarding the project. We will then, the board may ask questions of clarification at that point of the applicant, but we'll then seek comments from supporters of the project. Will be entertained. If there's any questions on the project, specifically of the applicant or their representative, those questions will be asked through the chair, and we'll engage the applicant as required. We'll then ask for comments from opponents. And again, questions will be made through the chair and engage the applicant as required. The board will then ask any additional questions of the applicant or any of the supporters or opponents as during this public hearing. We'll then close the public hearing, allowing the board then to deliberate on the project or the issues that have been raised, at which time we can again ask questions of the applicants, supporters, or the opponents that are present. And then upon completion of those deliberations, the chair will seek a motion to either approve the project with or without conditions, reject the project, or continue the hearing to a future date with instructions to the applicant. So with that ground rules laid out, I will read the notice. Planning Board of Town of Hatfield will hold a public hearing on November 1st, 2017 at 7 p.m. in the Hatfield Memorial Town Hall. The applicant Diamondback Properties LLC of Hatfield is seeking a special permit with site plan approval from the Planning Board pursuant to Section 3.0 Use Regulations, subsection 4.18, professional, medical, and business offices and services of less than 15,000 square feet, 5.15 warehouse and storage, and 5.16 wholesale trade and distribution of the town zoning bylaws relative to the property located at 65D Elm Street, formerly known as 17 Little Neponset Road, Assessor's Map 223, Lot 35.1 and 35. Zone industrial for redevelopment of an existing historic building formerly used by the General Cigar Corporation or Company for storage, processing, and distribution. The proposal is to create offices, workshops, storage, and distribution, and the application was available for inspection. So with that, we'll open the public hearing. We do have town council with us, Mr. Brackett, to advise the board on some of the issues that are outstanding on this particular application. But as I so stated, I will ask the applicant or their representative to make themselves known and provide a little presentation on the project.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Where would you like me?
Here, that way, yeah, and that way by the mic, and then we have this information here, which we can lay out, but so you can use that primarily to speak to the audience.
Sure,
Yeah.
my fine folks will be using
Okay.
the boards. I'm just here to open. So, my name is Alan C. Wald. I'm an attorney down in Northampton. Attorney Al Albano, who's sitting in the first row, and I represent Diamondback Properties LLC. Its principal, Tim Pachurik, is here in the first row. Many of you must know Tim. Tim is a lifelong member of this community. He's somebody who's invested very heavily in this community. He's part owner and manager of the Grill and Chill. He has an electrical contracting business here in town. As a matter of fact, he's been here all his life. He used to deliver papers to this building that we're speaking about when he was a little kid. We also have a design team here, and I'm not really sure where everybody went. Terry Reynolds, the professional engineer, is here. Jonathan Archibald, he's the architect on the project, and Randy Iser is here somewhere. There he is. He's a registered land surveyor. So we're here to talk about the building now known as 65D Elm Street, formerly known as 17 Little Neponset Road. The building was built more than 100 years ago. Part of the building was built more than 100 years ago. Another part was added onto it in the 40s, around World War II, or just before World War II. It was used by General Cigar as a tobacco processing facility, and offices, storage, distribution, that sort of thing. As we all know, tobacco had a real heyday here in Hatfield and in the Valley generally, and that ended sometime in the 1970s. But after tobacco's heyday waned, the tobacco company, the cigar company, continued to use this building for storage, for offices, right up until 2015 when Tim and as Diamondback Properties purchased the building and took over. Tim has continued office use in the building, storage use in the building, and he can describe exactly the uses that have been made of the building since he's taken over, but he has maintained and continued those storage and office and warehousing uses. I know, and I want to get to what this hearing is really about, but I want to first maybe address a little bit about what I believe it's not about. This hearing is not about who owns Little Neponset Road. It's not about what the relative rights in the road are. I have delivered today to the Kolpakis attorney and to your town council a 3-page letter outlining the claim that Diamondback has to the use of Little Neponset Road as an access to this building. It has been used as an access to this building for more than 80 years at least, at very least, there is what we call a prescriptive right, an adverse possession right to use this. But there's more right than that. There are rights that have to do with the severance of properties in common grantor ownership, and those are issues that are just not before the planning board. We have a valid and colorable claim to right over the road, and that's all, in my opinion. I'm sure you'll be hearing from your town council about this, but in my view, that's all you need to go forward, and now you apply the special permit criteria.
So you refer to a letter that you provided today?
Yes, this was a communication between counsel for the Kolpakis and myself that started with a letter from the Kolpakis attorney. I responded today. I have supplied a copy to Mr. Brackett. I emailed it to him today, but I know he's been on the road today, so.
So I don't think we've had a chance to see, the board hasn't had a chance to see that letter, is that correct?
No, Mr. Chairman, I
Yeah.
just received it from Mr. Seawald today, and I was in court earlier today, so this is a recent exchange of correspondence, Attorney Melnick to Attorney Seawald. I've been copied on it, but I have not
Yeah.
had a chance to provide it to the board.
And this,
that may be one of the reasons, Mr. Chairman, as I suggested, that because this involves multiple issues, my recommendation would be that we receive all the information provided tonight from both the applicant and any individuals who are seeking to oppose the special permit. You take it under advisement and continue at your next meeting, because I think there's going to be a lot to digest, not only by myself of these issues, but also by the board, and then I can advise you between now and the next meeting, and at the next meeting, we can deliberate and render a decision.
So, just a second. Knowing that there are issues, I mean, there wouldn't be this many people in the room if there weren't, I'm just wondering, though, I mean, we can go through all of the 8x10 color glossies, and but if it's a moot point in terms of the debate and issue over the access, are we spinning our wheels here today?
no, if I may, Mr. Chair, before I became city solicitor in Northampton, I represented a group of neighbors in a matter in Northampton that was very similar to this. And the planning board simply determined that there was a colorable claim to the use of the road, that it wasn't a situation where the applicant was proposing to access over land that he clearly didn't have any right to. The planning board went forward, issued the special permit, we went to land court, we fought out the land issues, and in that particular case, we prevailed. And the special permit was therefore annulled. But there's no way that you, as a board, are going to definitively determine who has what rights in the road. That's just outside of the scope of what a planning board does.
No, I understand that. That's why I'm thinking that this probably is something that either the parties have to eventually agree on, or there's a court date in the future.
Well, and of course, if there is no special permit issued by this, then there's no court date. I mean, that's what is going to prompt either an agreement or a court date, and and that ought to be left to the courts and not be your concern here at this point.
Okay, fair enough. Keep going.
So this is a phase one proposal that's being offered tonight. Diamondback is proposing offices, storage, and distribution uses of this building. The experts will talk to you exactly what the breakdown of the area of the building that's to be used and not to be used, but I understand it's about a little more than half the building is proposed to be used at this time. And we understand that if we're gonna build out the rest of the building, we'll have to come back to this board. And at that point, you'll have a track record of exactly how things are going there and have a better sort of baseline of what's appropriate going forward as we build out this building, if that ever happens at all. I ask you to consider the importance of allowing some repurposing of this building. As I said, the original function for this building is gone. And now the question is, are we going to repurpose this building and allow more modern uses in this building while preserving the architectural aspects of the building and preserving what is really a monument to the history of Hatfield? Or are we going to allow this building to fall to deteriorate and become blighted? I think that's in no one's interest. I have for you some letters, if I may, from the Historical Commission, from Preservation Massachusetts, and from the General Cigar Company that I'd like to put in the record, if I may.
Okay.
I'm not sure I have enough copies for everybody, but let me pass some of these.
So without reading each of them into the record at this point, can you summarize generally for the audience at home and hear what these say?
Yes, let me do that. General Cigar Company says that General Cigar and its predecessors had used this building since the 1930s. In its heyday, it had approximately 400 employees working in this building. Until the sale to Diamondback, the building was used for office space for a few employees to store tobacco, equipment, and machinery. This is a property in which the town of Hatfield ran water and sewer lines from Elm Street all the way down to the building, and that the town maintained, plowed, and maintained this road all the way to the top of the ravine where it goes down into the meadows. Historically, that was the situation.
So do you know, it's not so stated in this letter, but just because I think it has a bearing on some of the other items in the application. So they mentioned that at their heyday, there were as many as perhaps 400 employees there, but then they say prior to the sale to Diamondback, the building was used as office space for a few employees and to store tobacco equipment and machinery. Do we know how much prior to 2015 that was? How many years was it that there were 3 or 4 people sitting in there?
I think that there was a slow decline starting in the 70s and right up to date.
So is it fair to say over the last 10 years there have been, mainly crickets and a few people working in there?
I think that it's been fairly empty for
25 years?
There were people working there right up until the date that he bought the building.
Right, but they so state a few employees, and so, a few versus 400 is, that could be as little as 2, right?
No.
Right, but I would suggest, of course, that no one reasonably would expect that forever there would be a few employees in this building. It's an 80,000 square foot building, and
No, I know. I'm just trying to get a sense of how it's been within the community there. Has it been the last 10 years that there have been 2 people working there? Okay,
at least.
all right.
Preservation Massachusetts, a state preservation organization, says that this is a 1910 wood-framed gable roof 3-story building with a small L and 2-story concrete and brick veneer structure that was attached in 1940. They housed cigar tobacco processing right up until 2007. Notably, Preservation Massachusetts says the impact of this project on this community is profound, as it reuses an important part of town's history while creating new space and opportunities for businesses to become established and spur economic growth in Hatfield. So I'd like to offer the letter from Preservation Massachusetts.
That's right, just give me the whole package and then because I can pass them out.
And finally, a a letter from George Ashley, the chair of the Hatfield Historical Commission. He points out that this is one of 8 tobacco sorting shops that there were from the 1870s to the 1970s. He says that thousands of men and teenage boys and girls worked in tobacco fields and drying barns, and hundreds of women worked in the sorting shops. What is being proposed now, he says, is that one of the larger tobacco sorting shops located in the Elm Street Historic District, listed on the Massachusetts National Register of Historic Places, be rehabilitated and converted into commercial space. It is proposed that the exterior of the building be restored largely to the appearance that it had when it was a tobacco sorting and packing shop, and that the interior be rebuilt for commercial use. This is a reasonable adaptation for reuse of an historic building. It would help maintain a physical representation of an important part of the history of Hatfield. Off review.
And this is specifically related to the question of whether or not the applicant, if the project goes forward, applies for tax credits.
Correct.
Okay.
That was,
Yep.
those letters were
Yeah.
written in support of tax credits.
Right, because they require a very specific meeting of the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation. Okay.
So I'm going to turn this over to the design team in just a moment. But there's one other issue that Mr. Brackett brought up to me that I would like to raise now. Among the findings that I would ask this board to make is a finding that with regard to Little Neponset Road and its qualification as frontage. Okay? There's been a lot of debate, I believe, over the signing of the A&R plan that separated the house and barns in front from the larger building out back. And the way the A&R process works, as the board obviously knows, there's no public hearing, there are no findings, it's not a hearing at all. It's just a meeting and it's a review of a plan. And as I've discussed with Mr. Brackett, there's no legal way to rescind or modify an A&R endorsement. But what I would ask you to do is make a finding so that this issue is settled, that this is frontage under the third basis in the subdivision control law that defines a subdivision, and this is what the finding would be, that Little Neponset Road has sufficient width, suitable grades, and adequate vehicular construction to provide for the needs of vehicular traffic in relation to the proposed use of the land abutting thereon or served thereby. That's a finding I would ask this board to make, just to simply clear up any misconception or any issues with the basis for the A&R plan. That is a basis for signing an A&R plan. I would submit to you that Little Neponset Road fits all of those criteria, and I would ask the board to make that finding so that we can resolve this issue that Mr. Brackett and I have been discussing. With that, unless the board has any questions for me, I'll turn it over to Terry Reynolds, the engineer who designed the site.
Mr. Chairman, before Mr. Reynolds begins, just to clarify that point, the planning board did approve an A&R application on May 7th, 2014. And Building Inspector Kyle Scott brought to my attention a question that he had as to whether or not Little Neponset Way was a public way. There was some information provided back on May 2nd, the hearing on May 7th, about the fact that Little Neponset Way was apparently appeared on the Chapter 90 list of ways which were maintained by the town and for which the town would receive reimbursements from the state. However, in working with Town Clerk Lydia Seitch and Mr. Scott, we determined that the road was not actually listed as a public way. No record of town meeting exceptions as a public way. So this issue does go back, actually, for some period of time. I have just discussed this issue with Attorney Albano as well in the past. And as Attorney Seawald did point out, there are 3 categories by which an A&R plan can be approved. In in this case, it was approved, I would take the position, it was approved under the first category as a public way. That decision and the appeal period is final. The appeal period has long since passed. And therefore, looking at it, if we're going to be addressing this project in a global fashion, the appropriate category is subsection C of chapter 41, section 81L. And as was stated, a way in existence when subdivision control law became effective in the town of Hatfield, having in the opinion of the planning board sufficient width, suitable grades, adequate construction to provide for needs of vehicular traffic, and for the installation of municipal services to serve such land and the buildings erected or to be erected thereon. So, Mr. Chairman, I don't see this as a major issue. I see it as possibly a housekeeping item to take care of within this matter. It should not be the basis for any potential appeal. I have had an opportunity to speak with Attorney Melnick and with Attorney Seawald yesterday morning, just in terms of trying to categorize the issues that we're facing in this process and being able to advise the board accordingly. But any adjustment of that A&R decision to correct it to cover the third category rather than the public way category, I would suggest, Mr. Chairman, is not the basis for any appeal. The original A&R approval is final, so therefore any appeal from that minor adjustment to that previous decision would frankly be a waste of time, to be honest. I would suggest that to Attorney Melnick here in the hearing. It would just be fine-tuning that decision from more than 3 years ago to correct the category under the statute in which it properly applies. So it's really not relevant to your special permit consideration, Mr. Chairman.
So, if I may, if we were to take the action that's suggested, we are then saying that, you know, that Little Neponset Road has these characteristics. That has no bearing then on whether or not it's determined that Little Neponset Road is a public way or not. It's just whether or not we feel like it has the characteristics so outlined in the statute.
Right, and if that matter were before you tonight, and there was a suggestion of Chapter 90, and there was a question under the Chapter 90 listing, but as has been presented, this road has been used to access this building by some 400 employees over a period of 80 years. So that the third category requirements would appear to have been satisfied a long time ago. But this was addressed in 2014 because they were looking to divide the property.
Right.
So, and the other issue with respect to access, Mr. Chairman, just while we're on that issue, is there are statutory rights of abutters to a way for access and egress. And there are also issues with respect to easement by prescription under Chapter 187 of the Mass General Laws. So, in terms of access to and from the site, the ownership issue really is not relevant for this board. That would be something to be decided by the land court or the Superior Court. But 80 years of use of that road would establish either easement by prescription, if it's never been interrupted during that time, or at the very least, rights of access by an abutter to a roadway. So I can address that in more detail for you now, but we can put those issues aside and consider the special permit application.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Terry Reynolds, and so basically I put together a design that basically is providing for the current build-out. The current improvements to the building are to not completely utilize all the square footage in the building. There's approximately 83,000 square feet in the building, and currently about 53,000 is to be utilized. And that's a mix of warehouse space and office space. And in doing so, that basically generates a need for parking. As shown on the plan, it requires 75 spaces, which we are providing here. We actually are providing 90 spaces. And part of the reason for the amount of excess spaces is in order to maintain good circulation through the site. We are utilizing part of the portion of the front property which has a purchase and sale that's contingent on approval of the plan, which would be utilized as an easement on that piece. But we needed to generate a radius in here so that traffic can safely come and go from Little Neponset Road. which is right here.
So that's those extra 11 spaces that are on the adjoining
Yes, that's the
property.
11 spaces on the front parcel here. Okay.
What about the parcels below the top of the bank that are used
Here?
for farming? Yes. How are
This
those-
is
how are
all,
they-
this is all bank area.
How are they getting down there now?
Nobody's getting down here now. I mean, it can be accessed down Little Neponset and come in from behind.
Oh, I
There
see.
is no access from the property itself.
Okay, so Little Neponset continues beyond the paved.
Yes, it carries down into the fields. So, with this, I'm providing the 90 spaces. It's a mix of some, about 20% of 16-foot spaces, and then the remainder are 19-foot by 8-foot wide spaces, or 9-foot wide spaces rather. We did ask for a waiver for some of the driveway widths. So some of the driveways you'll notice are 22, where it's one way, we're down to 18. And then down here, we're at 24. These are all, provides adequate maneuvering space for both backing and parking. Provided also turnaround. As required, we've also provided landscaping, trees, as required for the amount of spaces here. So we have a mix of maples and dogwoods around on the landscape areas. And we've also providing handicap parking in front as required for ADA requirements. The site, as far as electric and sewage, is all existing. Nothing significant is changing on that. But what the improvements we are doing are based on the additional parking areas provided for stormwater meter strip and lighting of the site. So what's being provided stormwater management is because there is an increase in paving, there have been 4 separate subsurface infiltration drywall systems set up around the site. 3 in the front and 1 in the back. And so basically what's happening is these are taking in, infiltrating. In the front, we had an existing drywall that really isn't functioning. And so I'm putting in an actual designed dry well that will take care of that area. And then we have 2 other dry wells that will infiltrate and overflow, maintaining the existing flow characteristics throughout the site. All the flow throughout the site an operational difficulty has been maintained. The discharge points are being utilized. This is an existing discharge point down to the lower area on the south portion of the site. And a new discharge, well, it's not actually not a new discharge point, but it's an existing roof leader drain system that we're tying into, and actually are enhancing that with some riprap level spreader out in the end to ensure that we're not getting erosion going down the bank.
But this flow will eventually go off-site.
The flow actually goes, there's a road here that actually runs down, and so it'll actually be distributed down sort of diagonally, down the hillside.
So you're,
But
but onto adjoining properties.
yeah, all the flow on the site actually eventually goes to adjoining properties. So the way this is designed is so there's no increased flows going to any portion off-site. We're maintaining all the existing flows that currently go off-site.
Except but you acknowledge that you're putting in more pavement, so there's gonna be more concentration of water that otherwise right now just infiltrates into the,
No, that's why these infiltration dry wells are all here. So that equalizes it so that we're compensating for the impervious areas.
so you're going to store the water then and then distribute it out, or how, and just explain to me how
Well,
that.
these infiltration galleys infiltrate the water into the ground.
Okay, so you're gonna have, and then so only the excess goes out?
Right, yes, it's not a direct discharge. These have to fill up completely before they overflow. So generally, most storm events, these will not discharge at all. It'll actually reduce the flow that's currently going off the site. It's just the larger events, and that's in the stormwater report you will see that basically these are all being controlled so that there is no increase in the flow going off the site. So basically, you can ask me more questions of the stormwater, but additionally, new lighting is being proposed. Standing out in the front, pole, and then generally building lights. And the lighting has all been designed so that there isn't any spillover leaving the property. It's all cut-off fixtures, dark sky lighting. And then we have basically our dumpster location, which is actually shown on the layout, is going to be in the back here. And with the way this is designed is it's one-way traffic, so the traffic comes around and dumpster can be picked up and emptied, and then the truck continues out around. So it's clockwise around the building is how the circulation is designed. All right.
Okay,
That's basically it.
for your engineer, for your presentation. Okay, so I'm assuming that someone's gonna talk about what this is gonna look like and.
Yes. There. Yes.
And will there be someone that will talk specifically to the traffic study that was done?
I can talk through traffic study, yeah. So, actually, the trip generation, sorry about that. We did do trip generation on this, and basically, based on what the reported previous use was, there was approximately generating about 350 trips per day from the site.
When was this?
Yeah, when was that?
When was this?
This is just, to the best of my knowledge, for the breakup to the use of the building.
Well, yeah, 'cause that's one of the reasons I asked your previous colleague the question about how long it was between the time that the building was actively used by perhaps 300 to 400 people and then a handful of people, because, 383 total trips a day, that's one car going in or out every minute for 6 hours a day.
Right, no, I understand.
Those people are going for a lot of coffees if there was only 3 people in that building.
Trip generation is based on just the allocation of space within the building. So I'm not counting people. These are the numbers that are reported to me of the use of the building, and that's what that's from. So that's to the best of our knowledge, based on what General Cigar reported.
But is it fair to say that realistically, over the last 5 or 6 years, that there were far fewer than 383 trips a day?
Oh, most likely, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the fact that you're calling for 309 total trips a day, it's somewhat disingenuous to say that this is less than what was historically there, because historically could be 25 or 30 years ago.
Right. But the fact of the matter is if you look at basically, the concern is it going to create an impact to the function of Elm Street? Is it, and that's really where our trip generation comes in. Is it going to impact the function of the main drive there? And the most recent numbers we have are 3,600 a day, as stated on the top of the.
Daily traffic going past the intersection of Dwight Street.
Right,
Right.
that's the best we can do.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
3,600.
11 years old.
That's current traffic not attributable to this
Right,
project.
right, right.
Right.
So that's
So,
the closest count we have,
right, but,
so.
so I think it's important for us as we are reviewing this project and the impact of the project on the neighboring community as to how many more cars it's putting out, in and out onto Elm Street. And I think that it's fair to say that to compare it to 383 is
Well-
not, I mean, it's,
Historically, that would be the comparison, from when historically, that.
yeah, I mean, those
that's
may have
not-
been horse-drawn carriages going out, in and out in 1930 as opposed to SUVs, so,
Yeah.
okay. all
No,
right.
but what the concern in trip generation is the level of service, and is it gonna impact the level of service in Elm Street? And that is the assumption, that trip generation is not gonna affect the level of service on Elm Street.
Well, it may not affect the level of a service on Elm Street, it may affect the level of quality of life on Elm Street. That's a different matter.
That's a different matter.
Go ahead, Paul.
The people that were brought in there to the tune of 300 people. 75% of them were bussed in by my uncle's bus company.
Right.
When the people worked in the tobacco fields for the company, we brought them into the fields by bus in the morning and brought them home at night, okay? When they went in to sort the tobacco, they were brought in by bus and brought out by night. So there may have been 300 people working in that plant, but there certainly weren't 300 cars going in and out of there.
Now, this is not, the trip generation is just based on strictly the use of the building. It's not, it doesn't take into account, that this is a tobacco use, and it was migrant labor for a large part.
So it's
Or it
based
was
on the
young
square
kids.
footage of the building and what it was used
And
for,
those
and it's
uses.
hypothetical as to how many people might have been housed there at one time.
Yeah, and frankly, I mean, when you look at warehousing, those numbers are based on modern day warehousing.
Right.
It's not based on that kind of warehousing.
All right, well,
So-
we don't need to belabor this any longer. I think it's just fair to say, and you agree, that the number is reflective of perhaps what might have been there, and that, even 3 years ago, there weren't 383 trips going in and out of there.
Most likely.
Okay, all right. Thanks.
Do you want me to hold it? I might need it, actually. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jonathan Archibald. I work for Porth Architects in East Hampton, and we've been contracted by the owner to do the interior design and exterior renovations to this project. So we'll start with aesthetically, because that's what's here right now. And you can see below here is the building as it exists today. I don't think I need to say much more about it. Probably everyone in this room already knows what the building looks like today. It's a brick building, two sections of a building, as has been stated earlier. A wood frame section and a concrete section with brick veneer. And our proposal, as you can see above, is to give a more easily recognizable front to the building while still hopefully trying to keep, well, it's almost impossible to keep the scale of an 80,000 square foot building down, but to keep it looking in style with the other buildings in town as much as possible. So that being said, these plans just as they were and as they are. So this section down below is the section of the building that's wood frame. This section here is the section that's made out of concrete, the later addition. As the building exists, or existed as a few years ago, this was mostly storage in the basement area. As you go up, you had the warehouse storage, which was a large warehouse storage area here, offices in this section, a small workshop for whatever they had to do there. I'm not entirely sure, I'm not big on the tobacco industry. More storehouse area here, fumigation processing plant, and distribution area out in this area out the back. Above, for the most part, consisted of storage for more
I
tobacco.
think we're missing that
Yeah, we're
page.
missing that page. but-
That page was left out of the PDF. I'm sorry, we
Okay.
can submit that as well afterwards. Short of that, we have the roof, which is the roof. And we're basically back to where I started in the black and white version, just showing well, the differences between what the building is and what we're proposing in the front elevation.
So these floor schematics that you gave us, do these show us what you plan to put in here? Or it sounded like from what you were saying, this is what it was used for.
These schematics are what it is what is existing now. Thank you very much.
Okay, so do we have plans for how you expect to build it out?
Yes, we have plans for, go to A400. We have what you propose is more or less what you see here. As you can see in this area here, this section here, this is the addition to the front of the building. Basically, the section of the building that has the roof, this little section of a roof right here, it's currently kind of taking in more water than it's repelling. So the other portion of this proposal would be to fix that area of the roof.
So my question is,
So you're-
does this give us some sense as to what the build-out is gonna look like?
Yes, the A100 series shows what is proposed for what will be the phase one of this project.
So A111 is phase one, A112 is
Also
phase one?
Yes.
Okay. So all of this warehouse space, the warehouse storage,
Is existing to remain as is.
but the offices, the workshops,
That area would be, the office space would be expanded into the front section of the wooden framed building.
okay, and then A114 is just the roof plan. Okay,
Shows the addition of.
okay, so we've got a basement floor, a first floor, and the second floor is, we don't have one for the second floor, right? Or is
That would be the missing piece.
That's the missing
Yes,
piece,
that's
okay.
correct.
And so, what we're talking about, at least there was, under our use plan, or our table of use, we've got professional, medical, business offices and services, warehouse and storage, wholesale trade and distribution. So how does that all fit into where all of this is going?
As it currently stands, this is all warehouse, this is all warehouse. A section of this is warehouse, and this is where the workshop is, and over here is where the offices were as Mr. Kirk purchased the properties. What we're proposing is expanding out the office section into this area of what was prior a storage facility for the tobacco.
Okay, and so approximately how many offices then are in there?
Less than 50.
How many?
Less than 15 offices in there.
And so these will be offices that will be not only for the current business, but also perhaps let out to medical, to a doctor, to a dentist, if there's medical. So
We would
what?
not have medical in. The section as it's written out in
Yeah.
the code
Right.
says that they are all office and medical are built in as one section of the code. There would be no medical building or medical offices
Okay.
within this proposal.
Okay, So the Cooley Dickinson Empire is not moving?
They're not moving.
Okay, so then these are office spaces for,
Rental for small office uses, a lawyer, if I wanted to move in there, I suppose I could.
and then the warehouse and warehouse storage?
That is existing area that we were currently not changing in this phase. So it is currently used as warehouse storage, and it would be used as warehouse storage.
Okay, so the phase two could be breaking this out into other cubicle spaces?
Possibly, yes.
Okay, all right.
How big of a, you got a what, an 83,000 square foot building, and you're proposing to make this front part, where it's leaking now, I guess? What's the size of what's the current size of that area, and what's the proposed build-out of that?
It's about a 20-foot by, what's the width of this building? A 20-foot by 50-foot space that would be building out the first floor and the second floor to allow for egress, so we would need to bring the egress up to code, and elevator, the entry, and I guess there'd be 2 office spaces in that space. So it's mostly an addition to bring the egress up to code.
Okay. So, do you have more that you were going to present?
Just about it.
Okay, and is he your last, or is there somebody else that you were going to have?
Well, we have the surveyor here, if there's any issues about the road, we brought him just in case. Otherwise, do you want to speak to the renters? So, otherwise, I would just have Mr. Paciorek address the board.
Okay, why don't we do that, and then we'll maybe have a couple questions for you, but we do want to open this up to the assembly. So Tim, go ahead. Tim, why don't you come up here, just because there is a microphone there, and then that way it's easier for the camera. But the rest of you, at some point, we'll just have to have you come up to this microphone, but go ahead.
Just to clarify, in case there was any concern, this roof that's fallen apart, there's beams that are falling down, it's like the worst part of the building right there. That would be ripped off, and this would be built on the existing foundation. There's nothing that's gonna be, the only thing that would be external to what's existing would be a handicap ramp to meet code. As far as the rentals, they would be offices, contractors. I've had a lot of different contractors, whether they be a carpenter, a plumber, or HVAC guy that just needs an office away from home to do his office work. I'm not looking to get any medical, dental, but again, as stated, that's in the zoning. That's how it's written. But right now, it's just office space. As far as the storage, we're looking to continue storage. We have vehicle storage in the basement that we'd like to do. That's more winter storage, so there's not, there's a large percentage of the square footage that's going to be long-term vehicle storage in the wintertime. So the vehicles would come in November and then leave in April. There's no in and out, that type of thing. So, when you deal with the traffic counts and the parking spaces and all of that, it's taken into consideration the square footage, but really, there's not going to be that much traffic flow in those type of areas for the storage. And then as, again, just it was used for storage and distribution in the past. We're looking to continue to do that. There was used for offices in the past. We're looking to continue to do that.
So, I appreciate the comments made earlier about the historical nature of this building and the comments from George Ashley in particular. And Hatfield has a historically interesting land use pattern, because we have these mixed uses that are around town, many of them related to agriculture. And some of those then were memorialized, if you will, in our master plan. So we have, probably to someone just looking at our zoning map, this sort of odd industrial zone in the middle of a rural residential zone. Because it was memorializing what was, more of a manufacturing industrial activity, just like we have some, odd little business zones scattered around town because there was a business there, maybe associated with a farm in the past. But that being said, as these older buildings are now repurposed into newer buildings, we have experienced some issues, and some issues right on Elm Street. So I'm going to ask some questions that are related more to some of the issues we've had with some of the other buildings that were industrial or commercial that have now become repurposed in the modern age, and the modern uses are maybe not as always compatible with what otherwise are needs. So you talk about distribution. Of these vehicles that are going to be coming in and out, any idea how many of them are going to be 18-wheelers?
Don't know.
Are you anticipating that there could be 18-wheelers because of distribution? You're going to have trucks coming
Yes.
in and out?
Yes. I would imagine that there'd be, right now we have about one per week. I got light fixtures, there's different things, different vehicles coming in, but right now it's approximately one per week. We anticipate 1 to 3 per week. We've also would be setting some sort of a schedule where it would only be Monday through Friday. I mean, there's nothing that goes on the weekends there, hasn't for 2 years really, unless I go in my office or something. But there's really no, there's not gonna be any trucks on the weekends. So we understand that there's a community around us. And by the way, there is an industrial piece of property, the landing building right next to us that abuts us. It goes all the way down and abuts our property. So I'm not the only industrial zone piece of property right there. There's
No, I
another-
know, but as we look at industrial uses within,
Yeah.
I mean, it's different if you're in the big industrial zone on Route 5 and all of your neighbors are industrial. In this case, most of your neighbors, I mean, let's face it, are residential
Yeah.
units. Okay, so you mentioned trucks. So we've had even on 5 and 10 where we do have industrial activity adjacent to homes. So the backup beepers, the braking.
Jake breaks.
Yeah, those are issues that I know neighbors are gonna, if you're, what time are they starting? Are they coming in at 5:30 or 6? And there's gonna be backup horns at 5:30 and 6 o'clock in the morning on
Any large trucks, 18-wheelers, are only gonna be during the day, and they only are during the day at this point. All my loading docks are in the back. There's 2 loading docks. And it's in the back of the building, behind this huge 83,000 square foot building. There's no houses in the back. It's basically the meadows are back there. And I don't believe that anybody's gonna hear beeping in the back of that building, 'cause
Well, it's remarkable how far that stuff can carry. I mean, I live 2.5 miles, where I live on Linseed Road, and we can hear the highway clear as a bell. And so, yeah,
But what I'm saying is any of that activity is gonna be in the back of the building, not in the front of the building near any of the houses.
And what about time of day of activity? We've put limits on some of these buildings, some of these industrial zones, business zones off of Elm Street. We've actually specifically required that, the time of business does not start until after a certain hour, so that we're not having, a truck idling out there at 5 o'clock in the morning or something.
For my own electrical business, I do get deliveries at any given time, and they call it midnight delivery. All the small contractors get those deliveries. They're typically a smaller box truck that comes in. And I don't know when they come. Sometimes they come at 5 in the morning. I know that they've come at 11. They come at any time, whatever their delivery schedule is. All up and down Elm Street, there's different contractors. They get the same deliveries. Living on Elm Street for the first 16, 17 years of my business, all my deliveries were right onto Linseed Road, right up my driveway. And I never had a complaint from any neighbor whatsoever for 17 years of the deliveries going. Even when I lived on Dwight Street, I had deliveries that happened, midnight delivery. Never had any complaints by any neighbors whatsoever on any deliveries at any time of the night. And that was for my electrical business. That would be the only deliveries at this point that would be in the middle of the night type thing.
The only thing that to be fair, Tim, I appreciate all of that. We have to be looking at the fact that we're also looking at a, 55,000, thousand square foot.
Yep.
So there's gonna be other people other than you in there presumably. You anticipate that, that's expected. They're talking about renting out other spaces for distribution and offices. So we need to be thinking about that in the context of a larger footprint than certainly what's been there for the last 10 or 15 years. Okay, so we are at the point now where if there are supporters of this project that would like to make comments or ask any questions of the applicants, we will do that. In the interest of time, if you have heard your comment already said by somebody else, I don't think we need to have it said again. So is there somebody now that in the audience that would like to speak on behalf of the project? Yes, in the back there. Yeah, so if you can come forward
Have them state their name
and you state your name and
or their address.
yeah. Name and address would be helpful. Good to see
My
you.
name is Les Labarge. My name is Les Labarge. I live at 55 Elm Street, Hatfield, Mass. I got to look in my backyard, and I can say one thing: that building that they're working on hasn't looked as good as it's done in 43 years. Okay? The tobacco shop. Do you realize at one time that was a civil defense building in Hatfield? That's quite a structural building. Has any one of you members been in that building at all? Walked around in there lately? Take a walk. Do you realize how many businesses there is on Elm Street in Hatfield right now? On Elm Street in Hatfield?
We know there's quite a few.
There's over
yes.
15 businesses on Elm Street in Hatfield. Okay? Now, you were talking about traffic. I heard you mention about traffic, trucks going back and forth. Well, it's a potato season, and we got trucks going up and down that street 24 hours a day, 6 days a week. Any hour of the day, they're going up and down that street. I was working in my front yard yesterday, and I saw this tractor trailer come down the street, went down Elm Street, turned around, went back up Elm Street. And I'm looking, turned around, came back down Elm Street. I'm saying, where's he going? Oh, he didn't know where he was going, because there was no sign, Little Ponset Road. He was delivering to your building. But all I got to say is, I've been here for 43 years, and I went through that building. My youngest boy took 100 windows out of that building with his new Red Ryder BB gun. And when Joe Parada was manager over there, I had to go over and write out a check for it. The officer, the chief of police at the time, wouldn't give me the BB gun back. It was a collector's item. But all I got to say is, it's a nice building. They're doing a nice job. They're trying to make a living. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Les. Yes. In the back there, yeah, please.
I'm Ann Lanning, and I live at 61 Elm Street with my husband, Steve, and I can see this building out my backyard. As Tim mentioned, we also have a multi-use building with rentals in it, and essentially, I'm here with, my husband's also supporting Tim's project. This is literally in our backyard, and right now, what we've seen for the plans, we like the plans, they make perfect sense. The building hasn't been maintained as beautifully as it has been in the last 2 years. He's repointed the brick at the top, which was a danger. He's taken out the back water tank. He's really improved that property. What I haven't heard anyone say is the fact, what I really appreciate is that he has his business in this building as well. I might have been concerned if he didn't, because then he wouldn't be there, he wouldn't have his staff there. People are watching it, so as a business owner-occupied business, that's really important to me. And I live there. It's literally in my backyard. I've seen the trucks come through. It's not a problem for me. And so in terms of the aesthetics, I think this is a great improvement over what's been there when it was almost pretty much vacant from my standpoint. So I'm really appreciative of all the work that's gone into this building, the repurposing of it for the storage. It makes perfect sense to me. And what I've seen so far in terms of the quality of the work, it's outstanding. And so I'm lending my support, as my husband is, for this project. And I work in the museum field, and I'm really pleased to hear from George Ashley and the Historical Society having their support for this building. So.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Rob Wyckoff. I live on 4 North Hatfield Road. I've been here a little bit over 11 years. I've enjoyed the rural qualities of Hatfield a lot. I came from a rural part of the state out east that became less rural as time went on, and this reminded me a lot more of what it was like when I was a kid. With that said, I'm not a big fan of, development for the sake of development, or the confusion of progress and development is one and the same. However, I can't help but feel like if a building was approved to be built however many years ago, and it's been enjoyed by the original builders and made money and had a purposeful use, that simply because there's a lull in that usefulness for however many years, I don't feel that it doesn't seem right that then opens the door for abutters or others that are affected by the property to now stake the claim that that building can now no longer be put back into use. It was approved by the town or whoever was in charge at the time many years ago. This is why you think carefully before you plant something in the middle of an open field, because it could be there for a long time. It was approved, it was used, its use has diminished, but it's still something that's there. It can be useful again, and I think that warrants consideration. So for something like this, I think it's the net benefit outweighs, a building sitting in the middle of nowhere doing nothing, as opposed to disrupting vacant land, which would be, in my opinion, something that I would maybe feel a little bit different about. So that's all. Thank you.
So, yeah, something to add to what's been said?
Maybe.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Jason Niles. I live at 21 Scotland Road. I live probably a street over from this. We walk by this building a lot with our dogs when we had them, and constantly going by this building. One thing I've always said was, wow, that's a great building, but it's going to be a shame to see the thing actually fall at some point. So, when I heard that someone was actually coming in, a local businessman who's going to come in and invest in it, that's got to be a pretty good thing. I mean, one way to look at a lot of these projects, I hope the town looks at is, it's only going 3 ways. It's going to go decrepit and be an eyesore and come down. 2, we're going to have to inject public money into it and our tax money to probably fix these things. Or 3, you need, hopefully, a local businessman to come in and invest in it. So my hope is that the town could always support when we get that 3rd option, because, if you can save buildings like this and keep them around longer, that's a great thing. So, thanks.
Okay, thank you. How much time do we have of you here?
I'm here for that.
Okay, all right.
What you might want to do, Mr. Chairman, is, rather than hearing
Yeah.
repetitive, you might want to ask for a show of hands of those in
Right.
support. As one option.
Yeah, I think we've gotten a good representation of the kind of comments and support. So General Counsel makes a good suggestion. Of the people that are here that support the project, would you just raise your hands? Okay, did you get a good count?
I got 22.
Okay. All right, thank you. Since not every hand went up, and maybe some of you are here for another reason, presumably there's someone here that might oppose this. So I will open the floor up to those who want to express to the board their concerns regarding the project. So go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Pat Melnick. I'm a lawyer out of Northampton, and I represent Teresa and James Klopacki, who oppose this project. Their property is 69 Elm Street, which directly abuts this building. It's right there. They, in fact, I'll get into a little bit more of the history, but they're right on the Ponset Road. Their house is within feet of this building. They've been living there since 1991, so over 25 years now. We've submitted a letter in opposition, and I've detailed all of our reasons for opposing this plan in that letter, but I'll highlight a few of them here. I respectfully disagree with Town Council's position regarding the previous approval of this land being divided in the A&R back in 2015. It was put to you to divide the land, this building from another building on Elm Street. And the minutes of the meeting indicate that it was indicated to you that the Little Neponset Road was a public way. I don't think it's disputed at this point that it is not a public way. We provided a title to that road in our submission to you. And you'll see in that submission that this road is not a road at all, that it was in fact in the past deeded to my client's predecessors in title. They essentially, it's our position, they own this road, and it is not a road. You've heard Town Council indicate that there might be some prescriptive rights or some other rights of access to this building. But in the last over 25 years, this building has been used for nothing more than storage. There is currently an electric company there, as you've heard, but that has a couple employees. For 25 years, this building has been used for at most two or three employees for access to the building for a few trips a day, 3 to 5 trips a day, with some truck traffic on occasion. This proposal is for 90 parking spaces. We do not know the specifics of what's being proposed inside the building. There's nothing in this submission which tells us what types of offices are going to be put in there, what types of distribution is going inside the building. But we know they're proposing 90 office buildings. You've heard
90 parking spaces.
90 parking spaces.
Well, and that's due to the size of the building. That's prescriptive to our.
That might be due to the size of the building, but
Yeah.
you have to assume they're going to be used with their submission. You've heard the history of it in the 1800s and the early 1900s. There was quite a bit of use for the tobacco purposes. But you also heard that, I mean, that could have been horse and buggy. We don't know what it was back then. We do know what it has been in the last few decades. The last few decades, there's been almost no traffic on this road, on this way. And you've heard that for that time period, it's been a few trips a day. Getting back to my original point, you originally approved it back in 2015, thinking it was a public way. It is not a public way. There are other provisions which you can allow a subdivision of land under an A&R. One is that it is a way, and you've heard that it has to be a way which is suitable for the uses being proposed. This, according to the surveys you have, and there are a number of different surveys, this is at most a 20-foot wide roadway down to a 15-foot wide roadway. The proposed use is enormous. I do not think that this board can make a finding that this way is sufficient to allow an A&R plan. And respectfully, I think it was wrongly approved back in 2015. But getting past that and the traffic, I think you've highlighted a number of the key points that we brought up in our letter, and you've noticed in the submission. Their submission indicates hundreds of trips a day. That's clearly not happening there. There's 2 employees at most, or 3 employees, and it's been that way for decades now. So the idea that there's been 300 trips a day any time in the recent future is completely false. And as I said, back in the 1800s, we don't know exactly how many trips a day, how they were getting there, whether it was by bus or by horse. But recently, in the last decades, it was almost no use at all. So if there are any prescriptive use to this roadway, to this building, it's at most a couple trips a day. So how you get from a couple trips a day and access to this building for more than a couple trips a day, I don't see how you get there. And I think to approve this project, and we disagree with the submission, the council for the submitting party, you have to find that there's reasonable access to this property for what is being proposed. What's being proposed is a great expansion of the use with 90 parking spaces. 90 parking spaces to me would indicate up to 1,000 trips a day on this roadway, which is very small and which is in a residential neighborhood. So it's an enormous an expansion of what is being currently used there. And my client's house is right there. It's a residential house. They've lived there for 25 years. The idea that now they would be facing 1,000 trips a day with trucks going by at all hours of the day, and it would be a complete disruption of their home and their life. It would just completely transform the nature of how they've been living for the last 25 years. I'd make a couple more points of the submission. What's being submitted is essentially covering the entire parcel. They're proposing parking lots throughout the whole parcel, and the rest is covered with a building. There's 3 dry wells being proposed. I'm not an engineer, but I can't imagine I think they've actually admitted that that's not containing the water. The water's all running off, and that's all running off onto the neighbor's property. And the additional parking is just going to make everything worse. I've addressed the traffic study. I think the traffic study being submitted is completely inadequate. I think the proposed use is going to enormously increase the amount of traffic, both on Elm Street and on this way going past my client's property. And I would submit that it hasn't met, their submission has not met the special, the criteria required. The map's set up here, but if you look at where the building is as it relates to my client's property, it's a couple feet away. There's no way they can put a buffer or any type, and they don't propose to put a buffer between my client's property and this building. There's just not room. I know why they didn't. There's no room to do it. They have about 2 feet, I think, there between my client's property and their building. So my client this is a residential neighborhood. This building is in the middle of a residential neighborhood. And like I said, for the last 25 years, it's been used for storage, primarily with a couple employees. I don't know if you have any questions or if you've had a chance to review the submission we've made, but.
Do you have we have a locus map at an existing condition that they provided, but it doesn't specifically show the relationship between your client's house or buildings and their building. Do you have something that you can share with us that?
This is a recent A&R plan that was done. It doesn't have the buildings on it, but it does show the.
Yeah, well, that's what we have here, so I'd like to be able to see.
I have a small thing. It's a survey that we've attached to our letter. It's a survey recorded on Plan Book 232, page 11. It was performed by Richard Labarge and performed in 2014.
Yeah, so this was part, because I read through your letter. Was this part of that in here?
It was part of that. It's attached to that.
So it shows Little Napontet Road as a public way.
Does not show that.
Where's the frontage for these lots?
We don't believe there is any frontage.
Can we see that?
So this is the one, this one here?
Yes. No.
No.
Yes, that one.
Yeah, that one, but this still doesn't show where the house is in relationship to where the building is,
No, I can
right?
show you where the house is.
Oh. Yeah, this is just a locus map. Can you show me? Can you give me a sense as to where that is?
Their house is essentially right here. No, it isn't.
I think it's closer to the road.
Closer to the road.
Yeah.
And this is misleading also because this is, of course, a road here.
Right, yeah. Can I see?
That's a tax map.
Yeah, this is the tax map. Okay, so this is where the house is, and this building is back here.
This is our home.
Yeah, right.
This is our property, this whole.
Yeah.
Actually, their preference comes up to here.
Oh, so wait a second. This, Teresa, this one is your, this is your parcel here. Okay, so so your house is
They
here.
recently split it right here.
Yeah, your house is here. This is your garage, and then, but the building in question is back here.
Correct.
Okay, all right. That's what I was looking for. All right. Okay. Anything else?
I don't believe so, unless
Yeah.
there are any other questions.
Okay, and we do have the piece.
Can I ask a
submitted.
question?
Yeah. Yes, go ahead.
To see the parking, it's off the property. Can
Yeah.
you explain that? Property line's here.
Yeah,
And
they're gonna.
They got a bunch of parking off the property.
Yeah, I think he did. You, so the question is, the additional 11 parking spots,
Yes.
that fall onto the adjacent property?
Right, we're a contract purchaser of that property. We will be purchasing the front property probably in another entity. We'll be purchasing that through Tim. Tim will control that property if the special permit is granted. We have a contract to buy that property.
Okay. Council Brackett, you were going to ask me a question, or?
Mr. Chairman, just on that last question, may we receive a copy of the purchase and sale agreement? It's conditional upon this approval?
We
You
can.
can redact it.
We can provide a redacted copy.
Redacted copy,
Yes,
just
we'll
so
certainly
there,
do that.
just so, Mr. Chairman, the board,
Right.
it can be established that the applicant has sufficient interest in the property that they want to use for the special permit approval.
Right.
I just had one or two comments in response to Mr. Melnick's presentation. First of all, Mr. Melnick, in my statement earlier, I indicated the planning board approval was May 7th of 2014, not 2015. And absent any other statutory mechanism, Mr. Chairman, the Chapter 249 of the general laws provides what's called a certiorari appeal, which has to be filed within 60 days. So if there's no particular appeal period within the A&R statute under 4181L, which is the approval, it's not a subdivision, there are lots on an existing way, and the 60-day appeal period has come and gone. So that decision is final. And for the board's information, Mr. Chairman, I'm preparing for a trial on December 4th in the land court in Boston, and one of the issues is easement by prescription. And in my conversation yesterday with both Attorney Seawall and Attorney Melnick, I raised the question. Chapter 187 governs easement by prescription. And Chapter 187 says that an easement can be acquired by adverse use or enjoyment over the land of another uninterruptedly for 20 years. Well, my understanding is, based upon the history of the use of this project, prior to the Mr. Melnick's clients acquiring the property in 1991, more than 20 years had passed. And since their acquisition, there's also a statutory mechanism to try to interrupt an easement by prescription. You have to send, under Chapter 187, the same statute, Section 3, a notice of intention to prevent acquisition by custom. And it lays it out, Mr. Chairman, exactly what you have to do to interrupt those alleged rights. So if there's 14 years passage and you want to interrupt it, you'd send a statutory notice. But here, the information we've received is the historical use of this road going back, many decades, over 80 years or so. So the question of access to the property, I think, based upon what we've heard, and Mr. Melnick, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the documents you sent to me was a copy of a notice you sent to Mr. Seawald, I believe dated yesterday, denying or denying any future permission to use the road. Is that correct?
We had granted the current owner permission back in 2015. He indicated that he could use the road to access his the property for his electrical business. The letter yesterday indicated that based on his expanded use, I think there's a beer distribution company now there as well now, that we were withdrawing any permission that we had previously given based on his current expanded use that he's currently using it for, together with the indication that he vastly wants to expand the use as well.
Right, but just on that point, in addition to whatever agreement might have been reached in 2015, if your clients have owned the property since 1991, was any statutory notice sent under Chapter 187, Section 3 to the previous owners to interrupt any alleged access or egress they had over that roadway during those 23 years before you got the permission with Mr. Pacior?
I don't have any information, but when the company went out of business, I don't have any information from what happened before 1991. I believe it was not being used at all at that point.
No, but actually my question is, since the time your clients acquired the property in 1991, has any statutory notice been sent to the previous owner of the property, not Mr. Pacior, under 187 Section 3?
They haven't notified anybody.
They have not. So, Mr. Chairman, just on this point regarding access, I'm sensitive to the issue of access to and from a parcel and the rights of a party to a parcel of land for which they seek zoning relief. So if you get a copy of the P&S agreement for this additional parcel, then that will establish that they have rights for which you can grant special permit relief. And I'm since it's a condition precedent to the sale, you would include a condition in your decision that they have to acquire that land to add the additional acreage. But one of the things I would research further for you on this question is, based upon the earlier discussion we had of either the 20 years under 187, Section 2 having been satisfied before 1991, or the rights of access to a property owner abutting a way, private way, public way, subdivision road, whatever the category, the rights of access under Chapter 186 of the general laws. If those have been satisfied, then there is access to and from this site for which you can then consider the grant of special permit relief. Now, just one additional point I would ask to make sure we have a complete presentation. Through you, I would just simply ask Attorney Seawold, if you can, in addition to the presentation that's been made, if you can go through the special permit criteria to provide to the board how you are satisfying each of those criteria, because as you know, and I'm sure Mr. Melnick knows, when the board renders a decision, Mr. Chairman, you will have to make findings based upon your presentation that each of those criteria have been satisfied. And therefore, we have to do that based on the presentation and any information we receive in opposition.
Well, and also, I believe I made a note to myself in your earlier comments, you had mentioned that there may be some waivers that you'd like to get granted as well.
Mr. Reynolds mentioned a waiver. Just on the
Driveway width. So I think what Attorney Brackett is referring to is what's outlined in Section 5.33 of our code, which is the special permit application and the following contents requirements for that application. And then also under 5.44, the required contents for site plan approval, which are listed in the bylaw, many of which we know are probably covered in the documentation, but to his point of going through those with us.
I'm wondering, Mr. Chair, if it makes sense if you're planning on making the decision tonight, I will be happy to go through all of these criteria and suggest how we satisfy them. If we're going to be continuing to another night, I would be happy to do it in writing and present you with proposed written findings.
Yeah, I actually don't see how myself
I don't feel
comfortable doing something
decision
tonight anyway. So I'm thinking that we're going to continue this anyway at our next meeting. So that would be satisfactory because that would enable also, I think, for continued discussions between the two attorneys and our general counsel.
And Mr. Chairman, just on that point, if the matter is going to be continued by the board tonight, and if Attorney Seawold submits his statement of how this project addresses and satisfies the criteria, if he does that, in advance of the hearing, copies Attorney Melnick can then respond to that set. So before the next hearing, you have a chance to read Attorney Seawold's submission on the criteria
and whatever rebuttal there might be. Actually, Teresa, can you bring up that map again that you showed us, that you're going to get us a copy of your assessor's map?
Is this from the A&R?
No, the actual one that shows where the house is.
Alan, while they're doing that, you can't just willy-nilly A&R and non-conforming whenever you feel like it. Now, if you do have a purchase and sale agreement by Mr. Pachorik to buy the property that Mr. Szymanski owns, okay, if it goes back, the A&R would be taken off and it would be back to non-conforming.
No, it would be held in separate ownership, and there would be an easement granted by, well, first of all, when you have two separate lots that are both improved, they don't merge. Okay, merger doesn't apply to improved properties. It applies when there is an improved property. There has to be at least one unimproved property that is not, the frontage for which is not being used, or the area is not being used. So it wouldn't merge. But our plan is to put it in a separate LLC, and that LLC would grant Diamondback an easement for the parking.
Would there be anything in that LLC that would state that that property, the front property, the home, and the two barns, could not be sold singularly? It could only be sold in conjunction with the whole?
No, there would be no such then that wouldn't make sense. And I don't think that the board would want that to happen, because it would affect the alienability of property, and you just don't want properties that can't be sold or can't be sold easily. And that's why it was split up in the first place. So, you know, these are two very different uses, two separate uses, and they would be kept separate.
Well, but that also, though, gets to the point of any decision or any resolution to the issue of the public way of Little Neponset Road, because I believe, if I remember correctly, now this is over 3 years ago, with the assumption that Little Neponset Road was a public way, provided the road frontage necessary for this lot.
And what?
House lot as well.
And
No, Elm Street.
the Elm Street has, because
The house.
yeah, because they had.
Well, you need the 45,000 square feet.
Right, yeah, so back here.
So, as Attorney Brackett stated, and I stated before, there are 3 different ways that A&R plans can be approved. Okay? And when an A&R plan is approved under that third criteria, a way in existing with a subdivision located, blah, 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 that constitutes frontage. It's frontage on a private way, but it's frontage. And the reason we have frontage is because we need access. Frontage provides access. And the reason we have A&Rs is because there is access, there is actual access. And so that satisfies the requirement for frontage. Little Neponset Road would satisfy for frontage, the requirement of frontage for this building.
Okay, so actually my question, the reason I asked Teresa for this again is that as you're thinking through your responses to these, you know, again, I'm not suggesting anything other than the fact that right now you've got, you know, a little bit of screening and landscaping, but it doesn't look like you've done anything to actually suggest that you are close to a house and that there's some landscaping associated with.
You mean in through here?
No, like maybe more in here or something, if the house is right here.
It's pretty close when you're there.
Yeah.
It's real close.
So,
How many feet? Does anybody have a guesstimate? Is a land surveyor here?
But I didn't go on that property, I wasn't surveying for that, so I did not measure their house.
Yeah, their house is located right here.
Because it's closer to the road.
Well over the road.
Yeah.
Yeah, the garage is back here.
Okay, some people are saying a few feet, some people are saying,
Oh, no, it's more than a few.
yeah, I know, it's more than a
There's
few feet.
opportunity to screen this
not 2 or
portion of
3
the
feet,
building.
that's
There never
I'm just
has
taking the
been.
measurements from here.
The
Randy,
barns
how the hell?
provide screening to Elm Street.
The house in the barn, too.
Yeah.
right. Well, if you're buying this property, there maybe could be some more additional screening here, that's all. Just, anyway, just,
Yeah, I mean, it's,
You also don't want to interfere with the flow, I mean, traffic here.
is this the traffic, is this the road right here?
this is the road, yes.
Okay.
You need this
So
radius.
our back door to their building is 100 feet.
100 feet, okay, yeah, all right,
That's more like it.
all right,
100 feet.
okay.
I bet you it's
Actually,
more.
yeah, right, right,
I'd say it's 100.
okay. So, actually,
I just had
Yeah.
another question. Mr.
okay,
Chairman, if I
yeah.
may. Through you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Seawald, or the architect, I believe during the presentation there was a suggestion that you're seeking a waiver of driveway width. And could you tell me, are you seeking, while I haven't had a chance to review all the plans as yet, are you seeking that waiver in what form? Are you asking for something other than a dimensional waiver from the driveway width? Or are you suggesting a waiver under the special permit criteria? What is the source of your authority for the waiver of the driveway width?
It's just stated that the driveways shall be 24 feet, I believe. And so we have portions of the drive that are only one way, and it's not really needed. Plus, it doesn't fit with the existing property as it is. The drive on the east side of the building currently is only about 10 or 12 feet wide.
I'd like
you
more
can't really want
information
anything
regarding
to
like,
24 feet.
you know, it
It's not
talks about
necessary.
distribution, that was pretty
And we
sketchy
narrowed
to
it
me.
in the
And
front
then
of the
a number
building
of
also
offices.
to minimize the
You know, it's
amount
like
of
office
expanse that we're
space.
pushing it out towards Elm Street. That that's the reason for that, trying to keep that a little narrow.
We're gonna have one office,
Well,
three
I don't want to get
offices.
into too technical issue, Mr. Chairman, but if we're seeking a waiver of a dimensional requirement for the proposed use, this is not a subdivision, so this doesn't come under waiver of subdivision regulations. If it's a dimensional requirement for the driveway for a use in an industrial zone, one of the issues that we have to address is whether that requires a dimensional variance. Above and beyond any special permit relief, if you're seeking to alter the dimensional requirement for the proposed use on the industrial site, then the question, I only throw it out, I haven't reached a conclusion whether dimensional variance relief is required. In addition to that, I just, through you, Mr. Chairman, to Attorney Seawald, I know we've raised the question that the A&R is based upon lots having frontage on a way, one of the three categories. But can you represent to the selectmen that this proposed use has sufficient frontage in the industrial zone on the way for the proposed use?
Let me address that also. After the hearing, I will research.
Because absent the required frontage, Mr. Chairman, on the way, it's one thing to have a lot with frontage. It's another thing to have a lot with the required frontage for the proposed use.
Right.
So in addition to the driveway width, the question is if the frontage requirement is, say, 200 feet and the lot has 180 feet of frontage on the way, then it raises a question. Once again, I haven't reached a conclusion, but it may require dimensional relief from the zoning board in addition to special permit relief from this board.
I want to move this along. We have other things on our agenda, probably into the second inning at this point. So, are there other people here that are opposed to this project that would like to make a comment? Oh, yeah, come forward.
Betty Koch, 57 Elm Street. I've lived in my property with my husband for 53 years. From my house, I can see Tim's shop. The tobacco company was a great neighbor. We never had a problem. And yes, in the last how many years, there were 2 or 3 people working there. But there was sometimes several $million worth of tobacco stored there. It didn't get there quietly. Tractor trailers came day and night. And as a few of the neighbors can attest, when they came at night, they left their trucks running. Nobody, as far as I ever heard, and I was very friendly with the people that worked in that shop, ever complained about the tobacco trucks, the trailer trucks coming, and they left their trucks running. Why? Because it was a business. They were making a living. And isn't this what we're all about?
So, okay, so you're standing
I
in
am
support of the project?
support of it.
Okay.
When the tobacco company went out, we neighbors were very concerned what was going in there. It could have been some pretty bad stuff. And what do we have? A businessman who wants to rent offices. So maybe there's a couple of cars coming in and out. We live on Elm Street. For heaven's sakes.
Thank you, thank you. Actually, we were at the point where we were looking and entertaining comments from people in a fair share of time that are opposed to the project, so, or have comments in opposition to the project.
I'm not in opposition to the project. I'm the fire chief from Steve Bonner, the fire chief. I want to express concern about the waiver. That road, you can grant a special waiver if you want, and it doesn't make a difference. In the end, it comes down to whether or not that's a fire lane. The road around the thing is a fire lane. It's 20 feet. So that driveway is going to have to be 20 feet. Whether they grant the waiver here or not, it's going to have to be 20 feet. That's a fire lane. It goes right around as it is now. And so that's something to discuss in the long run.
I'm not sure you're asking for anything less than 20
No, I'm not
feet,
asking
right?
anything, no. Yeah, I think they are.
You're making a comment to the plans.
Right.
Yes, I'm making a comment that there's a waiver request.
Right.
And we look at potential bumps down the road, that road has to stay 20 feet width. So, and you were looking for less than 20 feet at one point, right?
Well, we've run truck routing all the way around the building.
Yeah.
So That building will handle a WD
Yeah,
67.
so 20 feet, and if it's 20 feet, I'm happy.
Okay.
That's what I'm gonna eventually mandate, so
All right.
that's, just wanted to throw that out there. So I know they're looking for less than 24, 20 feet is what the code says they have to have.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to present comments of concern relative to this project that's in the audience? All right, so just as we did before, of the people that are here, can I just get a show of hands of folks that are opposed to this project that are in the audience? Okay.
True.
Okay, all right. Given the number of issues that are on the table, literally and figuratively, and the comment that you, and the request that you submit in writing, you're meeting the various requirements for a special permit, which both parties would have a chance to take a look at. Both the board and the Klopaki's attorney would have a chance to take a look at along with his client. I would recommend that we get a motion to continue this public hearing to our next meeting, which would be December 6th. Right, Wilma? So I have a motion to continue the meeting, the public hearing, close the hearing tonight, but continue it to our next meeting and to address these particular issues.
You have a second?
And second by Paul.
I'll second it.
No, Paul Labby did, and
Who made the
Ron
motion?
made the
Ron
motion.
made it.
Okay, so any further discussion on this motion?
That's right, Mr.
I
Chairman.
got one.
The minutes can reflect that while you're continuing the public hearing, that allows you to receive additional information from the applicant, from the opposition.
Yeah.
Information from me that's included, and at your next meeting, you can consider that, close the public hearing, and begin your deliberations.
Okay, before we take a vote on this, Paul brought this up, and fill in if I've missed something. I think the board would like to hear from the applicant. We'd like to get a better sense of what you see the build out of this being, how many offices, what kind of uses you're expecting. I mean, we've heard about a beer distributor, we've heard about your electrical company. Who are you thinking you might be your clients? And that would be very helpful for us to get a sense as to what you're thinking of here. Again, I appreciate the comments made about bringing in the tobacco and so on, but we also want to make sure that we're not, getting something in here that becomes extremely disruptive as well. So both.
Totally agree. I mean, there are different kinds of offices, and
Right.
it makes a difference.
And there's different kinds of distribution as well.
Also, I'm concerned about the number of, you say offices. Is that more than 2? More than 20? 30, 40, 50?
I got to know it. I'll let you
Okay,
know
I'm just,
kind of what we're thinking about in
and-
terms
and-
of numbers, size, and types of use,
Right.
office uses.
and storage as
Yeah,
well.
Yeah.
Like, when you have a truck coming in every hour on the hour,
Yeah,
that kind of distribution.
Yeah, we have again, what happens at other properties doesn't mean it happens at yours, but we have another property in town that was going to store vehicles, and now we're finding that they're actually selling vehicles, and they weren't, that wasn't what they were permitted for, so we want to know what the extent of and nature of the businesses you're planning.
Understandable.
Did you announce a time for the meeting on the 6th? Are we at 7 o'clock again?
Yeah, so there'll be 6:30, right? Yeah.
I'll start at 6:30. Should we allow a little bit longer time for the,
For how
for the Helena? Maybe 45 minutes instead of
So I
half
would
an
say
hour?
7:30. Yeah, I would say 7:30. Yeah, there could be, yeah,
For the
yeah,
6:30 one?
yeah.
Well,
I would say 7:30, okay?
Thank you.
All right, thank you all, and thanks, everybody. This is what this is all about, open democratic process, so thank you for coming and appreciate your time. Okay, we're going to continue the rest of our agenda now after we took care of those matters. We have Delbert Glover, Old Stage Road. Oh, you're back.
I'm back.
Yeah, okay, all right. All right, come on up.
This is the A&R.
Oh, okay. All right, so you've been here before.
I've been here before.
Yep.
This is I'm going to say a variation on what I was here before about, you remember?
Can you guys just take that out in the hallway real quick? Thank you.
Let me
All
just
right, go ahead.
remind you, we're talking about 188 Old Stage Road. It's one of the properties we own. It's about a 10.3 acre parcel. We're offering for sale our house and 6 acres. And so it's subdividing the 10.3 acres into a parcel for 6 acres. And that means 4 would remain. 2 of them will become a building lot we'd like to sell. The other 2 we want to combine, actually, we want to separate and put into conservation, along with another 8 acre parcel that we have that's also on Old Stage Road. So the request is to be able to subdivide the 10.3 acres into a 6 acre parcel which would contain the house, and another 2 acre parcel which we call the Florida lot. If you look at the map, you'll see why we call it the Florida lot. Yes.
Okay.
And then another 2 acre parcel that would be between our house and the lot that was owned by the Storms, Carol Storm, yes.
Okay. So if I have this correct, your house and all of its appurtenances would be on the
6 acre parcel
lot,
yes,
which has well over 200 feet of road frontage on Old Stage Road.
yes,
And then you're looking for approval to subdivide off parcel 2, which
Yes.
could be a building lot because it's got enough
yes, could be,
dimensional acreage.
yes.
And it has also more than 200 feet of frontage on
Oh,
Old Stage
probably
Road.
400, yes.
And then you want this smaller 2.3 acre parcel.
Yes.
Which has
Roughly
200 feet
200
of frontage.
square.
Yeah, if these
Exactly.
calculations are correct, and we have to.
It was
see
drawn
the
for that
surveyor
purpose.
did a good job.
Yes,
There's 200 feet of frontage, and that would not be subject to the conservation easement, right? This would be.
Exactly.
To be sold separately,
Yes.
potentially for a house lot.
yes,
Okay, so this would end up with 3 house lots. The existing.
potentially 3 house lots,
Right.
but what I'm also, next week, will be asking is for the Florida lot to go into conservation.
Asking us or asking?
Asking the Conservation Commission, but asking, well, I would like your concurrence if that's what I need. Yes.
Yeah, so can you show us what the other, so you're gonna put these under a deed restriction continue to be held by you, or are you gonna?
No, I want to give it to the town.
So you wanna give them to the town?
Absolutely.
Okay, so can you show us where those parcels are?
This is a hill.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, that's it.
This is the
Right,
Florida
yeah.
lot.
That's
parcel
what I call
2.
the Florida lot.
Right, put that,
And that lot, that's
Okay.
8 acres, that would go into conservation as well.
okay,
So
so
there's 10 in fact.
10 acres.
10 in
total.
fact going into conservation.
So
Yes,
parcel
exactly,
2 and this?
exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
This and this?
On,
So adequate access really doesn't matter if Old Stage Road isn't upgraded. I don't know where Old
Well,
Stage
it's-
Road ends. It ends at its driveway, doesn't it?
Exactly.
pretty
So
rough
this-
past that.
this-
Oh, very.
This
The
this may
point
or
of
not
doing
be
this-
adequate access,
point of
but
doing
he
this-
says he's going to donate it.
This and this?
Right.
The point of doing that is because this is not accessible, and this discourages, quite politely,
Right.
any kind of activity in that regard.
Right.
So it's a gift to the town, puts it in conservation. The people who are buying the 6 acres understand that I'm doing that. They will benefit from that, quite
Sure,
honestly.
right.
They won't
but
have
who
any
has to pay
neighbor.
for it?
Right. And,
Can we consider a contingency that we grant the A&R approval contingent on that lot being donated?
well, but the fact of the matter
point.
is that this is,
Not that you wouldn't.
right, but Old Stage Road is a town way, right?
It is
Probably a county highway.
It's a county road.
said to be a road.
Said to be a
Yeah.
town
It's a
way.
county way.
So
it
with
is.
200 feet of frontage, it's an A&R regardless, right? Approval not required. Because he has 200 feet of frontage along an existing town way.
Public way.
Where you going? You getting out of town? Where you going? Back to New York?
No, Providence.
Providence.
My wife has an ideal job there that
Oh.
she's taken, so there I am.
I couldn't imagine you're bailing out after you
Would
got
not-
all this stuff
I do
straightened out.
not want to leave. Trust me.
Old Stage Road is even considered to be a town road.
Yeah. So actually, all you're needing from us is approval of this A and R.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, you come in from Williamsburg.
Yeah, you don't.
The only way to get there. You don't
can't
come
get
up
in
from
this-
Linseed Road.
Can't come this
Yeah.
way, right?
Yeah.
Well, this is as far as you can go.
If you can believe, we used to ride horseback up that road. It was clean enough to ride horseback up that road, back years ago. I mean,
People
500
still
years-
ride
That's all it was
bike
meant
trails.
for.
Yeah, that's
Wow.
right.
Never meant for motor vehicles.
No, never, no.
So we would need to stamp
Horse and
this and
buggy.
sign these.
No, this is an endorsement.
You can just
Oh,
sign
okay,
that
so we only
and
need to
date
sign.
it.
Okay,
You just need to sign.
okay. So can I get a motion to approve the A and R for these
I
2
motion
lots?
approve the A and R,
For, actually, it's for 3 lots.
3 lots.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And let it be known that the board appreciates your efforts to protect this property and hope that all goes through.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good.
Okay,
You guys want to sign it?
yeah, we need to start
Do I
signing.
need do anything else? And
No.
you need $50, right? I brought the $50. There you are. I did indeed.
Okay,
Yes, see the guy?
That was worth the wait.
Yes.
He's pretty confident,
Seems
huh?
like such a letdown after drama.
You think it was gonna be that easy?
Ah, God, no.
After that last
Yes.
Everybody wore us down. We do whatever you want now.
2 hours and 15 minutes?
Yes.
Erica,
Thank you.
what do you
Okay.
have?
Ashley, isn't it?
Are we signing the copies too?
Yeah, I think we have to, do we have to sign the copies? We have to sign the copies, Wilma, right?
Boy, it's down to the dime on here.
3 of them.
Isn't there
3 of them?
Okay. We can sign those in any color, right? All right, go ahead.
So
What you got for
I'm
us?
just updating all of you on, we have sort of a preliminary approval for the zoning change. This is for 15 West Street, the existing Spiegel Eltron
Parcel.
parcel. We want to do that expansion.
Oh,
And
yeah, the
part of the
addition.
lot, right, the addition, and part of it is, part of that lot is in Northampton, the majority is in Hatfield. So we have sort of a tentative approval from the planning board, it has to go through the city council. We're expecting to have that wrapped up by the end of the month.
Because the zone change has to happen on their side.
Right, yeah, and it's
Yeah.
already, it's gone through the first phases, the city's applied for that, and there wasn't any problems. Frank and I were both there, testifying. It's landlocked, I mean,
right.
it's not gonna impact them, it'll be additional revenue for them. But for us to do this expansion, we will have to, right now we have this water quality swale here, we would expand it here, and would all end up on the Northampton side, basically, and we would expand this way. So we're going to be submitting everything this week.
And
Hopefully.
you know the
Take
list
it,
in
wait
our
and get 'em all
bylaws
and
of
give 'em
the
to 'em.
items that are necessary
Yeah,
for the site
but I
plan.
just wanted to
Yeah.
give you, here's some
Great,
smaller
yeah.
copies, I just wanted to
Just,
give
yeah,
you
this
this
is,
since
this
I
is
had
wonderful,
these,
yeah.
and-
So rather than going to the other site,
Yeah.
which had so many limitations, you're going to expand it.
Well, yeah, this,
Or you
that,
did
the
buy it
other side is
in
ways
process.
off.
Oh,
cool.
I mean,
Right.
at this point, it's
Too
ways
wet.
off. Well,
Too much.
what's interesting, I've been going there now with all
That's
that
cool.
rain.
What do you
There
got
was a
here? What is it?
drainage
How many
ditch
acres?
further south.
Probably not
Right at the edge
maintained.
of the woods. And then they built that new one right in the middle, which makes total sense. I mean, you divide the property up equally, and who knows, it might have been 2 parcels at one point. And they used to put those on the property lines. So our argument is, well, can't we just relocate it back to the original spot, and then we'd be good? So, but we gotta see what we're gonna do. Frank, why don't you say, give it to a farmer and let them
pay it or whatever.
You got your glass out here.
But right now, we gotta do this. We absolutely have to do that.
No.
So, I just wanted
that's what you were looking
to give you a preview for next month.
Okay.
We'll be here. and
How much
I'll
bigger,
make sure we have everything.
where's the existing building?
The existing is right here.
And so you're adding this guy?
No, we're
No,
adding
no,
this.
this right here,
that's-
He
which
owns
is in
both
North.
these
Oh, he
she was
does,
saying this
okay.
He
is
owns
on
both of these, so
So,
we're adding this,
18,000
100 feet.
square feet.
Can't
Of
go
which,
more than
of which
100.
about a half of it is in Hatfield and half in
Right,
Northampton.
exactly.
Okay,
You got to have a magnifying.
okay.
So we'll submit here.
I can just barely see it.
I don't think, we have to go to conservation because we're moving this too, so we'll be doing both.
Okay.
But Northampton suggested that we get our approvals here, so then,
Right.
you know, then everybody's on the same page. When we go there to finalize with conservation and planning there, everybody's on the same page. so.
Okay, great.
And I think I'm assuming, I've been here so many times now, you're all in support of this, right? Of us doing this? More or less? Or
Given the
kinda-
expansion in-
You're not
yeah.
sure about it?
Not sure, sorry.
Maybe?
Yeah.
Anyway,
But you're not gonna see it from Route 5 anyway.
no one's gonna see
There's
it.
nobody
It's not
gon-
gonna
nobody's
change
here, so I
traffic. We
wouldn't
don't
think
have to
there-
add- We're not adding any additional traffic, no, I mean, it's gonna be the same thing.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much.
The brewing,
Yeah.
the brewing company.
I
the
did.
coffee brew.
They finally opened up
Yeah.
last week, and
How
I
is
went. It's good. They did a nice job inside. They have a nice selection, you know, different offerings that you don't find.
Yeah,
I mean, they
I'm
have the
sure.
usual sandwiches, but they've also got salads and baked goods and baked utensils and
Cool.
different, bunch of different coffees and stuff. So, yeah, it's nice. I hope they succeed.
Yeah, I hope so.
Why? They need it. The
Yeah.
sign is so tiny.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It's really.
So as Ashley
Anyway.
comes up, Mr. Glover, you have,
Use the blue
just
one.
you're looking to donate the property to the town to the Conservation Commission. So you have a meeting with these guys next week?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good. All right, thank you. Hi, Ashley.
Hello.
Delbert, we hate to see you go because you listened when you came in here. You're the only one.
Yeah, so they're still continuing to sign.
All right, good.
So I have my copy of that.
Ashley, do you mind if I stick around to hear your presentation?
Oh, sure.
Since
I read it
I
all
was at the beginning of
Good
it.
job.
while I was calling. This is from,
I want to present.
You guys want a copy of this, Stibel Eltron, for your records or anything? This is the Stibel Eltron out on
Okay.
Route 5. Where their existing building is here, they're just gonna put an addition on the back of that. But part of it, this is the property line, so they gotta get permission from Northampton and us, because half of it, it's half and half,
What about jumping?
roughly.
yeah, further down where the guy's got the storage buildings, he's never come back. When we told him we had to go to Northampton, he never come
Well,
back, did
actually,
he?
Northampton, they're very supportive of this.
Yeah. Oh,
Says
this,
this
yeah.
is clean industry.
There's only two
You're doing
there.
it sustainably,
There's
you're
only two
taking
left
care of the site.
That's
They're
what
so
I
happy.
went by the other day and I saw two.
More happy
So I'm thinking maybe whatever he
So,
sold, he's not gonna put them in for the
So
winter.
Ashley, can you introduce
can have
yourself
those.
again to the audience and then we'll...
To the
Yeah,
audience.
it's a one, I actually know it.
Well, no, and to the viewing public.
So I'm Ashley Eaton. I'm a land use planner at the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, which is your regional planning agency. So we provide technical assistance and are working on some housing bylaws with the town. And so tonight in front of you, you have a draft of the inclusionary housing bylaw. So it's a continuation of our discussions last month. It feels like it was last week. So I took all of the feedback that I heard, I presented the 3 bylaws from other towns, gave you a bunch of options. And this is sort of what I heard from you all. And so I'm looking for specific feedback if there are things that need to be added or changed.
So I was not present at the meeting in which Ashley first talked to you all about this, but she and I had had a chance to talk at some length. And so I appreciate what you've put together here because it reflects a lot of the conversation that I know you and I had had. I made some notes. I don't know if everybody else had had a chance to go through this, and I hope if you didn't, that you will with some intent, because I think this is a really important subject for us to be working on going forward. So I just had a couple quick comments. Many of them were in reaction or response to your questions.
Great.
So under applicability, C, it's any life care facility or any elderly persons and/or handicapped persons housing development that includes 5 or more dwelling units and accompanying services. And our language is, we call it, which actually came from you guys.
Yeah.
It's called congregate housing for the elderly and disabled.
Okay. And
Gilbert, give that to
and do you want to include that as it being applicable?
I think since there already has been interest in 55 and over housing, and we have one already,
Okay.
that we should at a minimum include the 55 and over housing projects, which
Okay.
are not at all nursing homes, but are, you know, as we know, on the one on Elm Street, there's a significant number of units there.
Yeah. And now I can, I can check your definition, but congregate housing for the elderly, does that typically include nursing homes? Because I think it makes sense to exempt
I would, yeah.
nursing homes.
I would agree. I would exempt nursing homes as well. But the 55 and over projects, the one on Elm Street,
Yeah.
fell under 1.23, which was congregate housing for the elderly and disabled.
Okay.
And so I would need to look up in our definitions to make sure, but I'm assuming that congregate housing for the elderly includes housing for 55 and over.
Okay. I can check into that.
Okay. We do not have a housing, there is a Hatfield Housing Authority
Yeah.
by name. But at the moment, the Housing Authority only handles the senior housing, Capewalk housing. So we don't have a housing trust, there is a housing committee that has been, but there's only one member right now. It hasn't really been fully staffed with members. That was a follow-up to the housing production plan.
Right. John Wilkes was on that.
With you and,
Yeah.
right, and so then they created a housing committee.
Oh, they did?
Right, and Steph Schlige is the only current member
okay,
of
all right,
that.
okay.
So, assuming that that housing commission will become a robust committee,
Okay.
particularly in light of, say, any of the recommendations that we move forward, I would change that to
the
housing
housing committee.
committee or housing commission.
Great.
Steph, on page 2, okay, applicability?
Yeah.
In all zoning districts, the inclusionary zoning provisions by this bylaw shall apply to the following uses. Any project that results in a net increase of 5 or more dwellings. Okay, how many do they have to provide?
So
One?
if you jump down to section 4.0,
Yeah.
if it was, the way that we've approached this is if it's less than 5, they don't have to provide any affordable units.
Okay, all right.
If it's 5 to 10, it's 1.
Okay, all right, I got you.
11
Okay.
to 20, and it
Okay.
just keeps
All right.
going in that
All
sort
right,
of
but
pattern.
it never goes after 20, it just, at this point, stops.
Yeah, and that was a question of, well, no, the next page goes to 21 to 30 units. And
Okay,
it's
excuse me, yes, it
this
does, okay.
stepping pattern, so it would
Yeah.
go on and on and on.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah,
And
okay.
so what I
So if
suggest.
somebody came along, we would just,
If
if
you've
they
got
wanted
that
to do
80
something
unit
that crazy.
development.
they-
Right. So what I was going to suggest for that is that maybe either as an asterisk or another block,
Yeah.
you say say something to the extent, something similar or something like, for every additional 10 units or portion thereof,
Okay.
minimum of 1 additional dwelling units. So from 31 on, to 100 or whatever, you'd say for every additional block of 10, of 1 to 10 additional units thereafter, a minimum of 1 additional dwelling units per block of 10.
If we got one of them, we'd never have to worry about it the rest of our natural
Yeah.
life. We'd be over our percentage
Right.
forever.
I just noticed in 5B, there's just a typo there. It says waiver from 1 or more of the dimensional requirements specified in section 4 of the zoning bylaw.
That's a good one. Yeah, so this is a draft, I will say, I
yeah.
haven't proofread it.
Yeah, and so what I'd like to point out to the committee is
50%.
that what Ashley has done here, I personally think is terrific, because one, it assimilates affordable housing into any and all projects, as opposed to separating affordable housing in, various areas. And it also does so by integrating them, obviously, integrating them into these potentially new projects coming forward, and does it in such a way that it really is seamless visually to what, the casual observer might see as they drive past a project or walk around a new development or something, in the sense that they're integrated into the project. They are phased with the rest of the project, so it's not like they're left as an afterthought, and then we're scrambling to get the developer to do them.
Right here, right here. There's a big article in Amherst. This guy said he'd build 6, he hasn't built 1 yet.
Yeah.
And they're scrambling to try to get him to stand up.
He's accruing, I think, $600.
$600, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, so you're building them into and phasing them into the projects. And then the other thing was, I agree, you actually there was one more note here that I would like us to consider. And we're not necessarily approving this tonight, because I still want all of you to have a chance to really read this. But on page 6, in 3, under timing, the phasing plan shall also provide that the affordable housing units shall not be the last units to be built in any covered development. And then Ashley suggests you could add the language that not granting the certificate of occupancy for any unit until the affordable units are completed. So there's basically, it's almost like a performance bond.
So at the
There's
last.
the hammer, there's the real hammer.
At the last meeting, there was concerns about can we require a performance bond, and I did some research on that, and the concern is that you, the town, would then get the money from the performance bond, and then actually have to go build the unit, which is like,
And you wouldn't get
to do
enough.
that?
So I think in lieu of a performance bond,
Yes.
holding off certificate of occupancy until they've adequately met all of the requirements of the development, which maybe include the affordable housing, but it also, as we found out on Elm Street, sidewalk, screening, maybe a playground. I mean, there's lots of things that developers are expected to do, and they're long gone, and you're still wondering where your play structure is.
Well, in that condominium situation,
Yeah.
in the apartment situation, you may have some hammered or something,
Yeah, so I actually, at least again, for the sake of further discussion of a draft, I would like us to consider that.
Okay, I can add that language in.
And who's the whole,
Actually, you know what happened
who's
here?
going to enforce this? Is that the building inspector?
That-
The Board of Select, who enforces this?
This is my question here.
Yeah.
They said they were gonna do
It's the
it.
building
They didn't
inspector
do it. Now it's gotta go back, and they're gonna rip into this thing. And the guy said, I would say that an active situation that is going on, Zeomic said, it's an active situation. They didn't come up with any answer. They're just trying to buttonhole this guy to do it. Like the crosswalk and all the other stuff that they didn't do.
Well,
So,
it's,
I
it's
mean-
occupied by other tenants too.
At the end of the day, like, you're going to approve the project, and then if you have this contingency that there's the certificate of occupancy, that's gonna come down to the building inspector. And Amherst's bylaw doesn't go into as much detail as yours does, so I don't actually think, and I don't have the examples with me, but I don't think they outline all of this, the need for the inclusionary housing plan, where right from the beginning, the developer is gonna have to be providing those documents to you that also talk about how they're gonna market the unit, how it's gonna be filled with somebody who's actually eligible.
Yes.
So your
Okay, I see.
bylaw is setting it up that they're thinking about and doing that work from step one, because you won't approve their project
Right.
until you have that housing plan in place.
So you would have, we have no enforcement authority. You have the Housing Commission,
Yeah.
and the building inspector would be the,
Yeah,
holding the
he'd-
hammer over
yeah,
the.
he'd be the
over
hammer, yeah, he'd be
Over
the
the
one that would
developer's
hold
head to
Your
make
certificate
sure
of occupancy.
that
Well,
he's
Kyle would
complying
like to
with
be the man at
the letter of the law here,
He can
to make one of those units just as equal as the other, and it's not leftover material, for example. you know, I'm
Well,
gonna
the
build
other
this one
thing-
last, and,
Well, the other thing too is that I would think that any developer who is, you know, gonna propose a project of this size that would require this, it would behoove them to then work, say, for example, with Valley CDC, to the Valley Community Development Corporation, to actually be the agent that then handles the marketing of the unit and
Yeah.
making sure that you meet, the person that buys in it meets the requirements and so on.
That's something, so in Hadley right now, they have some units that are about to come online under their inclusionary zoning bylaw, and the developer's like, I don't have the ability to do that. I don't know how to do all the things that are gonna meet the state requirement. And it is very similar. They are actually pairing up with Valley CDC. But PVPC is noticing that there's that need in the community that's not being met. So we're also getting trained right now so that we could.
Okay.
So you could be the interlocutor between the builder, us, and the
The
tenant.
developer could technically hire us once we're certified as providers to do their marketing, their lottery, and their monitoring.
I see.
Just as they
Yeah.
could hire Valley CDC.
I see.
So there are these groups in the region that if the developer's like, I don't have the capacity to do this, I know I need to, but I can't, you as a planning board could direct them to exactly the Valley CDC or us and say, hey, these agencies are trained to do this.
We could do that up front.
Yeah.
In the planning stages it is. Yeah.
Well, and it doesn't make sense for a developer to do it either.
Yeah.
Financially. It's better if there's like one central entity or
Right.
one or a couple that are doing that or managing. It's like a bank and people know they can go there, kind of like a HAP.
Yeah.
Or a.
Yeah, exactly, yep. Okay, so would it be fair to say that our next
Oh, I got
step, and this is an assignment for each of the members of the committee, you have a draft from Ashley, would like you to read through it and carefully, if you have additional comments or questions or concerns that we can then address with Ashley at a future meeting. I would suggest it not be our next one.
I cannot come back.
You
It's
can,
part of my issue. So my grant funding ends in December.
okay,
So this is my last meeting with you,
Oh, okay.
unfortunately. If you could email comments to me,
okay.
I will be able to, I can also take phone calls during the day.
You can come back, you just won't get paid for it.
Yeah.
You can come back.
I live really far away, guys.
Well, could we,
I have to drive to Westfield
Yeah.
tonight.
Could we
Yeah,
do
but the
this?
highway's
Could
right
we
there.
ask, I'm gonna ask all the committee members, if you have any questions on this, to either get them in writing to Wilma or email them to Wilma, and Wilma, you assemble all of them? And then we'll get them to you, Ashley, once they're all assembled.
What's your deadline?
So if I could have comments back within like 2 weeks,
Okay,
in the next 2 weeks.
all right, so we would want to get comments back to Ashley by the 16th.
Yeah. And then I'll turn the bylaw around in another draft,
Okay,
send that back to you all for review. There's
then-
probably enough time that if there are other tweaks that need to happen, I can fit those in.
Okay.
And then drop dead deadline is the very end of December. You'll have a bylaw that's ready to go to town meeting, and a report that starts to.
we have to hold some public hearings.
Yeah, so
I'd
you'll
like
carry that
You know,
through.
January
Yeah,
and February or
we
whatever.
would. But we can, if we want to get this on the,
Right, by the, yeah,
we can there'll be a placeholder, but we would then want to hold public hearings.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
if you found that it was, so even though my grant ends in December,
Mm-hmm.
if you would think it would be helpful for me to be at your public hearing to answer questions, we can talk about how you can request some, like, free technical assistance from the commission.
Okay.
So
That
I
would be
could come
great.
out and help
All right,
get
good.
it over the finish line. The other piece that, we started this whole process with exploring and is still a bit unanswered is that affordable housing density bonus in your mixed-use district.
Mhm.
And my suggestion was that if the inclusionary zoning is to move forward, it makes sense to just remove that
Mhm.
because you're gonna be getting at your units in a not voluntary way.
Right, right.
And so that's something that you'll all have to consider and would also have to go to town meeting to be amended.
Yeah, because there also are some bonuses built into this, both for waivers of some of the dimensional requirements. So there is some bonus, if you will, in this particular
Yeah,
proposal.
I read it in
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you're under the 5 units, but you still want to provide an affordable unit, we've written it so that they could still take advantage of those waivers.
Of the waivers,
Of the waiver,
of the
yeah.
dimensional waivers, which is good.
But that only seems right. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, all right, Ashley, thank you very, very much.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah, sure.
Wait, sorry. Well, you know, we want to do some housing too, but anyway, this is in addition to what Frank usually does,
Yeah.
he also does housing. But I just was curious, because of the whole accessory unit, have you decided anything around accessory units yet?
Not yet.
So not
That's
in the-
another
And
other
would,
project.
if somebody said, I want to do an accessory unit but make it affordable as a rental, would that fit into that?
Yeah,
I
you
mean,
know,
it's not within the minimum, but I'm just
Yeah.
curious about that, because I could see that.
Yeah, no, that, we do
It's a
want
potential.
to address that, and maybe we need to reach out for another grant from PVC.
Well, and so I have an update on that as
Right.
well too.
Okay.
But I would caution, so there's affordable, like I'm gonna set the rents cheap, but then there's affordable, I'm gonna have it on the state's subsidized housing inventory,
Right,
and it's
right.
gonna count towards the town's 10%.
Right.
If you have an accessory dwelling unit, I don't think you're gonna want to pay somebody to market the unit
Right.
so that it's
Right.
on
Well,
that
it all depends
inventory.
how that whole structure is set up and what's.
Yeah, so
you know,
we,
what
we're
the
looking
need
at
is, but,
projects that
yeah.
we can get credit for on the local initiative
Right,
project
right,
against the
of course.
10%
Yeah,
requirement.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
we
I
haven't
know that
really
part,
started to
yeah.
look at the in-law apartment, the accessory apartment yet. I learned just last week that there's actually a community out on the Cape that's allowing accessory units, but they have to be rented for full year.
Oh,
They
yeah,
can't be,
vacation
they
out
can't
there.
be, they can't be seasonal rentals.
Right, well, but.
Oh, so they're putting a lock on it down
They're-
there.
they're
They can't-
ma-
Yeah, but that
yeah,
makes
they're saying-
complete
yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
I mean, that
Year-round
makes
rental.
complete
So
Yeah, right.
in all likelihood, a
Yeah, so you
year-round
can't
rental
just
is
rent
more.
3 months and- yeah.
It'll be an affordable rental,
Yeah.
or at least a rental to an employee rather than a vacationer,
Yeah.
so.
So my other update was at the end of the meeting last time I talked to you about some land use planning grant money that was available at the state. And there was the issue with it was that there was a 25% match that the town would have to give in cash. And I was working with Marlene to see if that funding was gonna be available. Marlene has found money, so PVPC has applied on the behalf of the town of Hatfield.
Oh, good.
For funding to work with you all to do an accessory
Okay.
apartment bylaw, and then in that grant, we also included some of the work that my colleague Corinne
On
had talked
transfer
about.
development rights and the
On the
open space.
Yeah, in the
Okay.
grant, we wrote specifically about the open space development, because
Okay.
it fit the goals better.
Mhm.
So we should hear back from the state on that within a month. It's pretty competitive, so we don't really know what the chances are, but your name is in the pot,
Good.
and maybe there's gonna be funding there.
All right, that's great.
So
Terrific.
that's coming down the line.
Thank you.
That's what I've got for you. So give me your edits.
Okay.
We'll have a bylaw. Yeah, it's, I can just give you a card.
So please get any comments or concerns to Wilma by the 15th. And so she can assemble them and get them off to Ashley, so we meet her deadline. Okay?
Perfect. Yep. It's been wonderful to work
Great.
with you all.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you for all your help. So it's really late. We have one other thing that I just want to bring to everyone's attention. And I'm going to have Wilma email this to everybody and get a copy to you, Rick. Some of you may have seen my performance at the Board of Selectmen's meeting last week. I was asked to come in because they have actually gotten an inquiry from someone interested in putting in a 45,000 square foot marijuana production facility in Hatfield.
It's not at 62 and a half Elm Street, is it?
No, it's at 17 Neponset Road.
And so I talked to the select board about a number of things that we need to be thinking about, and Pioneer Valley Planning Commission is going to be getting out some model language, but the town cannot, the town can opt out of marijuana sales and production, manufacturing, if it votes at a ballot vote, so at, in a November ballot, to vote to opt out, because the town passed the referendum. The referendum to allow for recreational marijuana sales and manufacturing and production passed in Hatfield. It didn't pass by a lot, but it did pass. So the law that was passed by the legislature after the referendum was adopted made it very clear that if a town adopted or passed the referendum with a positive vote, it would have to actually vote at a ballot measure, on a ballot measure to opt out. So it's not just something that the Board of Selectmen can choose to do or town meeting can choose to do. So
But you can vote to opt out.
you can vote to opt out. So the town has basically three things in front of it. There's three options in front of it. One is to move to a ballot measure next November, in all likelihood, to opt out, which may fail. And if it fails, then the town needs to consider what it's going to do. It can also adopt a moratorium that would, Marlene and I are looking into this, but we both feel like from the language, it would buy us until the end of next year to put together bylaws and all of that. Or we just move forward with drafting and adopting bylaws that would allow for, again, the location of recreational retail sales as well as production. What I recommended, and the Board of Selectmen seemed to agree with this, that we should probably work on parallel tracks, that we work on potentially presenting to the town meeting in May a moratorium, which would buy us some time, but at the same time, we just get started on looking at ordinance language, because Pioneer Valley Planning Commission is going to be putting together stuff, and we can start to look at that, because if we decide at town meeting to not adopt the moratorium,
Then we gotta come up with a
we've
bylaw.
got to come up with the bylaws anyway, so we're in a position, we might as well just get started. Because Pioneer Valley Planning Commission is going to be putting together standard language. They've already put together standard language for a moratorium, which I'd like to get on our next agenda, so that we can take a look at that. And Wilma, if you can then share that language, the moratorium language, with everybody, the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission model ordinance, we can at least start talking about that. But I think we also then, as they come up with their model ordinances for bylaws to approve, to cite recreational retail location facilities as well as production facilities, I think we should start looking at those as well, because they're there. We might as well take a look at them.
So for instance, like Amherst and Hadley, they're in favor of the recreational, so they don't have bylaws
No,
in place.
that's
part
because
of,
they've
like,
got planning staff. Amherst they're already
yeah, that's right,
writing their
too.
bylaws. They're doing it on their own.
So Pioneer Valley Planning Commission is, there's all these other 357 communities,
So
cities
they're-
and towns in the Commonwealth that are probably in the same boat in terms of having some kind of a bylaw, so but these guys must be helping
Right.
people in Western Mass with.
Exactly.
Or
That-
like you,
they're
like
helping-
a generic bylaw that we.
Exactly. That they're helping the communities like a Whately, not that
Yeah.
Whately's in their service area, but Whately, Hatfield, Granby, towns that like us don't have planning
Right,
staff. But
right.
Northampton and Amherst
Right,
and
have a planning
they're
staff,
they're
yeah,
they're already Amherst has got it on their town meeting warrant.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, no, I read it in
I think
today's
it's gonna
paper.
be-
They're looking
yeah,
at whether or
that's
not
right, too.
they're looking at whether or not whether they're going
They
to
have
have it,
one,
but
they're
whether
gonna
they
have
allow 6
many.
or 8.
Yeah.
Whether it's how many they're going to allow. So we'll put that on our agenda for the next meeting. So we have 2 really important issues to address at our next meeting. We've got the Helena Chemical property, which we know that there is some opposition to that from some of the neighbors, but of course.
Where were they? Why didn't they come tonight?
I think that they didn't speak. Some of them were here. I think they didn't speak because we didn't have anything really to look at. We had an incomplete application.
Okay, all right.
And then, of course, we're going to be getting additional information from the applicant, as well as, I'm sure, more paper from both the opposition attorney and also our own attorney on the Diamondback project.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah. So thank you all for your attention tonight and time. Wilma, thank you for your extra time, and to our photographer. Can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Was there any question about whether you're gonna get one or not?
Well, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Good night.
the meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Good night.